Okay. Brief introduction, Lisa Sorenson. Lisa is an ornithologist and a conservation ecologist with 35 plus years of experience working in the Caribbean, including teaching, research, environmental impact assessment work, project planning, conservation education, and training. She has expertise in waterbird and wetland ecology and conservation, climate change, conservation education, monitoring techniques, and the list goes on. She's the executive director of Birds Caribbean. Lisa oversees the organization's region-wide projects and programs that raise awareness, promote sound science, and empower local partners to build a region where people appreciate, conserve, and benefit from thriving bird populations and ecosystems. If you know Lisa, and I've known her for, I hate to say, maybe 25 or 30 years, you know she is passionate about her work and enthusiastic about the many partners she has and help conserve birds. She's fantastic. I welcome Lisa Sorenson.
Thank you so much, Paul, for that very kind introduction. I'm thrilled to be here and have the chance to speak with you all. These workshops and conferences are always so great for connecting and reconnecting, meeting new people, seeing the progress that's been made, and then moving forward together. So it's always very, very inspiring to be with a group like you all today. So let me just get things going. All right, so an alternate title for my talk might be Awakening with Birds, Raising Awareness and Building Capacity for Conservation in the Caribbean. That's what we've been doing for the last number of years. And just a little bit of background about me and how I got started working in the Caribbean. I don't actually have very many slides of myself, pictures of myself in the field because they're all on slides. That's how old I am. So I know some people had trouble finding pictures. Well, this is just me having fun mostly. But I got started working in the Caribbean because I studied the breeding ecology and behavior of white-cheeked pintails in the Bahamas. And they'd never been studied in the field before. So everything I learned was new and it was really, really very exciting. My main study site was on the ponds of the Paradise Island golf course. I was sitting by those ponds while the golfers drove by and were shouting "for" and everything. I never, ever got hit by a golf ball. I met many, many wonderful people. There was just a very small staff at the Bahamas National Trust then, but they were my very first Caribbean conservation partner and became like an extended family to me, along with people like Pericles Malus. Does anybody in this room know Pericles Malus? He's a legend in the Bahamas, incredible person. Other people like Eric Carey and Lynn Gape, who were very, very early mentors and collaborators with me. So these early experiences really shaped me and influenced the trajectory of my entire career. And I love the Bahamas and all the bird life and the people. And I became aware through my work that there was really a huge need for more conservation work in the islands, in the Bahamas and in the islands overall. So after getting my PhD, I went off and did 5 years of postdoc research at the Smithsonian. I was at the conservation, at the, what's it called now at Front Royal? Anyway, with the Smithsonian. So I was doing research there on captive ducks, kind of extending some questions from my behavioral research, like what are the correlates of mate choice in pintails, things like that, hormonal dynamics of ducks and birds, doing some pretty esoteric stuff. And then I went on and did more postdoc research with Dr. Terry Root and Steve Schneider on climate change impacts of birds. And I worked for a different nonprofit, the Union of Concerned Scientists, for a while. So I did a few other things before I came back to the Caribbean again. But I went to my very first meeting of the then Society of Caribbean Ornithology in 1996. And I found a way to start to get more involved. We had a workshop on the West Indian whistling duck, and this was a threatened regional endemic. And everybody came together to discuss, what was the status of the duck on their island, and we learned it had been extirpated from a couple of islands, and we discussed what the causes of the decline were, things like invasive species and and hunting and poaching, but mainly the main cause was identified as loss of habitat, from development. So everybody said, "Oh, we need a project. We need a project." And so they said, "Who can write the first grant to get to start some work?" So I was the very green, newly graduated PhD. I said, "Okay, I'll write the first grant." So that's how I really got started working in the Caribbean. And for a few years, I just did that, weekends and evenings because I had other jobs and things that I was doing. But eventually, I found a way. It was around in 2002 to do it full time, and that's what I've been doing since then. So, yeah, I've been working in the Caribbean actually for close to 40 years. I struggle a bit with the math because I just celebrated my 39th birthday again last month. So it doesn't quite add up, but who's counting? All right, so as Paul already pointed out, we're a regional nonprofit, and together with our partners, our mission is to raise awareness, promote sound science, and empower local partners to build a region where people appreciate and conserve and benefit from thriving bird populations and ecosystems. In case you're not that familiar with the West Indies, let's see. Which one is my pointer? Is there a pointer on here, Paul? Doing it. Oh, it might need to be turned on.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
turned
it
on.
needs to be turned on. Okay.
No.
Okay. So the Caribbean or the West Indies is composed of the Bahamas up here, and then you've got the Greater Antilles, Cuba, Cayman Islands, Jamaica, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico, Greater and Lesser U.S. Virgin Islands, and then you've got the Lesser Antilles down here, the Leeward Islands. And some of these are volcanic, some are limestone. We also include, even though the ornithologically, the ABC Islands, Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, and Trinidad and Tobago are actually part of South America. We do include them in our purview of Birds Caribbean because they are islands and they face the same conservation issues as all the other islands. So it's a really challenging area to work in, as you can imagine, because there's like 31 different countries, dozens and dozens of different islands, bigger ones, smaller ones. And throughout, tourism is the main source of income. So in addition, many of these countries have high levels of poverty and unemployment, and therefore environmental conservation is not a priority. And prime ministers and presidents are always looking for ways to reduce this. So there's a huge pressure, development's the answer, build, provide jobs. There's always the promise of development and 10,000 jobs from this development or that development. So that's the pressure that everybody's facing. And everyone working in the island is really facing those similar threats and challenges as a region. So it makes sense to come together to do conservation. So one of our amazing staff, Alex Sansom, quickly put this together for us. Uh-oh. Shoot. No, don't bomb on me now. This was working before. I'll have to just restart. Sorry about that. She put together a little video of some of our members and partners, just highlighting some of the people. We didn't have time to put everybody in that's in our network that works with us, but it does highlight some of the people that we work with. Okay, fingers crossed this works. Let's try again. Oh, hold on. Am I back on? Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. Oh, but hold on. It's working, right? But I know. I forgot something. I need to do presenter view. That's the problem because I lost my notes. Too many things to think of. Okay, is it working? There we go. Okay. So as you can see, we're a naturally diverse organization. We have people from multiple ethnicities, countries, and cultures. We speak multiple languages, including English, Spanish, French, Dutch, Papiamento, Haitian, Creole, French Creole, other Creole languages. And our members and partners include people from local conservation or civil society groups, wildlife managers and foresters, from the government, decision makers, teachers, tour guides and tour operators, volunteers, businesses, and international partners. And it's a group of really amazing and beautiful partners, incredibly dedicated and talented and passionate people who come together because of our shared love of birds and our desire to conserve them. So we're happy to work with anybody that wants to work with us. We welcome you to join us, partner with us. And we all just come together with this shared goal of conserving the region's birds. So as many of you may know, the Caribbean is known as a biodiversity hotspot. It's one of the top 5 areas on the planet for biodiversity conservation. It is home to over 700 species of birds, and of these, 180 are endemic. We have endemic trogons, toadies, hummingbirds, parrots, orioles, hawks, woodpeckers, songbirds, and so much more. Sadly, about 54 species are globally threatened. Another important thing that, of course, we all know, but not everybody in the Caribbean knows, is that the Caribbean is also home to neotropical migrants. And more than 120 species spend the winter in or migrate through the islands, including dozens of songbirds. And the region is a stronghold for several at-risk species. It provides the only known wintering grounds for the globally threatened Curtin's warbler and also the Bicknell's thrush. So the Caribbean is an important region for breeding and migratory shorebirds and waterbirds as well. It is an important area for the near-threatened piping plover and a few shorebirds breeding in the islands like the Wilson's plover, the snowy plover, killdeer, and American oystercatcher. And many of these species have been declining for a number of years, and we don't really know why. So yeah, here's some piping plovers. They're found mainly in the Bahamas, Cuba, and Turks and Caicos Islands. So in our work in the Caribbean, we, get the point across that, hey, we're all connected through these migration routes. Some species spend the whole winter, others use the islands as stopover sites. And as I mentioned, of course, everybody knows how shorebirds have been declining. The lesser yellowlegs is one of the species that migrates through the island, and some spend the entire winter. Whimbrels also migrate through, and the satellite telemetry studies that have been done show how important the Caribbean is. Some birds that have been tagged show up at the exact same spot at the exact same wetland every single year. So they really are philopatric. And if those wetlands are gone, what's the bird going to do? There's really not much of an option for them. So something to always think about is the looming threat of development, that these habitats could disappear in a year or two from inappropriate development. So many of you probably remember the story of Machi and Goshen, the birds that were shot in Guadeloupe. And that had a really big impact on advancing conservation in the French Islands. We'd been talking about the problems of hunting for years, but finally it took a story like a bird with a name, showing how far it had flown and what happened to it, that finally got the French government to take some actions. And I don't have time to go into detail about a lot of these kinds of things, but we've got lots of stories to tell like that. But anyway, these birds come down. You can see this whimbrel here just arrived in St. Martin. From what I hear, before they start migration, they're like flying footballs. Well, this is what they look like after they've flown for a few thousand miles. You can see how skinny the bird is. Its keel is showing. And when they arrive, these shorebirds just feed and feed and feed. They don't even know that you're there because they're just so busy feeding. They're just starving. So it really drives home how important these wetlands are in providing a place to rest and feed. So unfortunately, the Caribbean birds face many threats. I would say that the main threat is loss and degradation of habitat, and that the development is, it's from mass tourism. I mean, it's all along the coastline mostly, and it's marinas and golf courses and second homes and gated communities and all-inclusive resorts and so forth. And so everywhere you go, there's just always development going on. We're constantly fighting fighting the next one, that pops up. I mean, Pete knows about Save-Goat Islands and what's happened with Font Hill and things like that that have happened in the past. So it's a constant battle. Here's just one recent example. This is Mount Hartman National Park. Has anybody been there? This is what it looks like in the rainy season. It's very lush and green. It was the park that was set up to save the Grenada dove, which is a critically endangered species. There's only about 160 individuals left in the whole world. And they live just in 2 different places on Grenada. And this is what the habitat looks like in the dry season. And you can see here that there's 2 wetlands here. These are 2 mangrove wetlands that are really, really important for migratory shorebirds. They're just loaded with shorebirds. And we have been battling development threats there. This is a picture of the most recent proposed development. I happened to be on a plane once going down to do a workshop in Grenada, and Bonnie Russ was there. She's a Grenada dove biologist. And she said, "Oh, I'm going down to meet with the developers." We knew this was happening, that they were going to do a development and it was going to impact and infringe on the Grenada dove's habitat. So I told her, "Well, I'm doing this wetlands workshop, and these wetlands are really important, and you should, why don't you tell the developers about this workshop and send them?" And they were from a company called Cinnamon 88. They came from the UK. They came to the workshop and they learned about how important wetlands were. And they said, "We're going to go back to the office and we're modifying our plans. We're going to not put the golf course in the wetlands." And so, that was like great news, like, wow, fantastic. So they worked with Bonnie, they modified the whole development. And then it was 2008 and the recession hit and that whole thing just fell apart. But there's just like, then the next developer comes along and proposes that next thing, and then that falls apart. So, it's a constant succession of projects that you're battling. And this is just one in one site. There's 2 other sites in Grenada that are facing the same thing. But this is what's happening now. This is what it looks like. They're starting to put roads in. And fortunately, we have built this consortium of concerned citizens, and they are fighting this in the courts. They're saying an EIA was not done properly. There was no transparency. So they're holding things up in the court right now, fighting this. So there's hope still. But you can see here, this is a plover that's here using the mangrove wetlands. So these are the kinds of things that we're battling all the time throughout the islands. I can give you examples from every island. These are some of the additional threats that we face. On some islands, there's introduced and invasive mongoose that, of course, prey on chicks and ground nesting birds. You have oil spills occasionally from tankers that are passing through. This was taken in Montserrat. There's a lot of feral cats. You have deforestation for agriculture and also for making charcoal. And then you've got illegal trapping and trade. And we're fortunate in the islands to have 9 endemic species of parrots. And, there's issues with, of course, people, they're struggling, they're starving, they're trying to feed their family, and they can take a couple chicks out of a nest, sell them for thousands of dollars. And, that's the reality of the pressures of life. And so that's a battle as well. There's also illegal trapping for the pet trade of migratory songbirds. And this has been happening, it happens in a number of islands. It's the worst in Cuba, and we've known about this for years. In Cuba, Spanish heritage, there's a really strong culture of keeping birds as pets. They have their birds in cages and love the bird song. They do it because they love the birds, and they love their birds just like we like our dogs and cats. And so, every house you go by will have a pet bird singing in it. It's often the endemic species, and more and more it's the migratory species as well. What we've noticed, though, is that with social media didn't come to Cuba till a few years ago. The government didn't allow Facebook. But once Facebook came in, and then when the pandemic hit, then it just like increased, 10, 100-fold, this sale of birds. Because it used to be that the trappers would have to walk down the street with their cages, shouting out what they had for sale, or go to a market and sell them. Well, now they could just set up Facebook groups and they sell the birds. So we did some research on this. We had a couple of our Cuban colleagues document all the Facebook groups that they could find selling birds, and some of them have like 40,000 members. And so there's 30 different Facebook groups that are selling birds here. And during October 2021, they recorded the daily catches posted by the bird trappers. And our data showed that among the posts of this from 356 members, the following birds were trapped: 2,041 indigo buntings, 785 painted buntings, 235 rose-breasted grosbeaks, and many others, totaling 3,270 birds from 28 different species. This was for 1 month from one Facebook group. So it's a huge problem, and it needs to be addressed. I don't think it was even mentioned in 3 Billion Birds. So, we wrote an article about it to raise awareness. Oh, rose-breasted So were you guys aware that this is going on as bad as it is? It's a really serious problem. So we wrote an article about it, did a media release, and we're just really we want to do a big national campaign. We've got some smaller projects started, which are fantastic. With some small grant funding, we've got some of our partners going around and starting up bird clubs, really grassroots stuff, raising awareness, and pointing out that, hey, these birds at Mayor Volando are better flying free, and more beautiful, more free is the tagline. So we're really trying to work on it, but we really need a whole national media campaign in Cuba. But of course, it's very challenging to raise money for Cuba, so we need, some private donors like the Knobloch Family Foundation would be great. Maybe they would support this. I mean, it's really, really important because we think this is having impact. And of course, we know that from a paper by Clark Rushing in Ornithological Applications that male buntings wintering in Cuba were 20% less likely to return to the breeding grounds than birds wintering elsewhere. Well, you can see why that's happening. And, I don't know that we need more research to show this. We know it's happening. What we need now is action. So what else do we have going on? Oh, we also have hunting of shorebirds. So this is a big problem in the French islands of Guadeloupe and Martinique, and then also Barbados. And of course, you also know about Suriname and Guyana, where it's a really, really huge problem. Here in these islands, it's not for subsistence, it's for sport. And, the hunting culture is, again, very strong. It's really hard to change that. It takes time. But it's something that we're working on. It's been challenging. We are doing work now in Barbados. I know that Brad Andres and BirdLife, and there's been research going on, and that's been really, really helpful. It's gotten to, some of the hunters are getting the message, and they are beginning to close down their shooting swamps and turning them into reserves, which is incredible. And I was doing some wetlands workshops there last year with Alex, and we met with the hunters. And in fact, our field trips were at some of these shorebird reserves now, and they're managing the swamps for the shorebirds. And they are, some of them are getting older, and they're saying to us, gosh, I don't know why I shot so many birds. They're just so beautiful. I just want to sit here now on my deck and watch them and enjoy them. So I don't know. I think when you're young, maybe you have that bloodlust and you just love to shoot things. And as you get older, you start thinking about your own mortality. And, so there's definitely some changes that occur. But it's wonderful to see that now they want to work with us, and they're going to work with us on our Caribbean Birding Trail Guide training program. They want to be bird guides, and they want to tell the story of what's happened. And 60 years ago, the last Eskimo curlew was shot on one of these swamps. And they've got the decoys, they've got the bird whistles, they can tell the stories, they can show you the logbooks where the curlew was shot. They've got an important story to tell about the history of shooting on the island, and how things have changed, and now it's important that we all do conservation. You can't do what you used to do in the past. All right, so other challenges: hurricanes. Of course, with climate change, we're expecting to see increasing frequency and severity of storms and hurricanes. We had Matthew in 2016. Irma and Maria was like a double whammy. It hit like 17 different islands with major, major damage. Then we had Dorian in 2019, which impacted severely 2 islands of the Bahamas. This is what some of the damage looks like. You can see just trees snapped off, major flooding. And then this, of course, has impacts on the local birds. This is the Bahama nuthatch, and it was only known on Grand Bahama. And that island, the hurricane sat there for 2 days, and there was like 10 feet of flooding. And there were very few birds to start with. You know, the last survey was only able to find a handful of birds. Well, nobody's seen the Bahama nuthatch since then. It was declared a new species, but it's probably just recently, but you know, it may already be extinct, very sadly. So anyway, all these species are impacted in different ways, and I could tell stories about each of them. So other additional challenges in the region are a lack of appreciation and awareness about the importance and value of birds in nature, lack of knowledge about the most important sites for birds throughout the islands, and then a lack of capacity of local people to study, monitor, educate, and conserve birds. So how do we, as a regional bird organization, help advance conservation? So in the beginning, the society was started in 1988. We were at first the Society of Caribbean Ornithology. And for the first 10 to 12 years, we were very small. I was not involved at that time. I was still finishing my PhD, having kids, doing postdoc work, other stuff, so I didn't get involved right away. But for the first 10 to 12 years, the society hosted a conference every year and published a journal. And these two activities were really, really, really important. They brought our conservation community together. People were able to come together and discuss the most pressing bird conservation issues on their island. They could present their work, what they were doing, and share their lessons learned. And they would hold workshops to decide on priorities and develop projects. And over time, working groups began to form. We have a lot of working groups. So this was incredibly important early on because even today, conservation work on an island can feel really, really lonely. You can feel really isolated, like you're the only one doing this work and trying to get things done. So the conferences served as a place for everybody to meet up and get re-energized and inspired and you know, realize, hey, we're all in this together, and I have all these people that have my back and are encouraging me to keep going. So the other important thing that we did was publish a journal. At first, it just started out as a newsletter called El Patiri. And Dr. James Wiley, rest in peace, he had the foresight to understand how important it was to have a unique peer-reviewed publication. It's free, open access, and it's published in 3 languages to accommodate authors across all the islands. This eventually evolved into the Journal of Caribbean Ornithology. And then now it's a fully online journal. And we have all of our archives on there, everything, of course, freely accessible. And again, from the very beginning, Jim Wiley had the foresight to realize that it was really important to give voice to the entire Caribbean community, as well as those beyond the region, as a place to publish your work. You know, so we didn't have a bunch of gray literature where nobody knew what was done locally. You know, so Cubans published like crazy in the journal. And we placed really special emphasis from very early on in assisting early career and underserved or disadvantaged authors with manuscript development, improving their organization, their clarity, their English grammar and usage. And so through this mentorship and development, we really strive to remove the barriers to the publication of research, which, you know, a lot of people, if they would have submitted to the AUC back then or whatever, you know, they would have been just rejected. You know, the papers needed work. So again, getting back to the challenges about, you know, lack of appreciation, lack of knowledge, lack of capacity. Our partners told us that, hey, we need training. We just don't have the knowledge and skills to do bird conservation work. You know, the research, the monitoring, and the on-the-ground conservation and education work that needs to be done. And we need materials and we need equipment. We don't have binoculars. We don't have bird education materials. You know, nothing exists. So we set about to, and then of course funding. You know, the governments, again, they didn't have money to do conservation work. So that really formulated, you know, what our mission was, and that was building capacity. So we started to develop regional conservation projects, activities, and materials. We put a huge emphasis on outreach and education. We really believe that that's so important. You know, we're in it for the long term. We want to make it sustainable. So it's not just about reaching people now, it's about reaching kids and communities and getting the message out to everybody so that, you know, it's lasting, your impact is lasting. So we also wanted to support science and on-the-ground conservation. And so we started offering training workshops and grants and opportunities for networking. And we wanted to make bird conservation a positive, both culturally and economically, and develop this network and community of local people that care about birds and become involved in their conservation. So the very first project that we did was the West Indian Whistling Duck and Wetlands Conservation Project. And it was the project where I raised my hand and said, okay, I'll write the first grant. And we had this workshop on this beautiful duck. I mean, is that not the most beautiful face you've ever seen in the world? I think this duck is so pretty. So kudos and shout out to like Herb Raphael, who was at the Division of International Conservation. He was a founding member of our organization. And then also NMBCA, because I wrote my first grant proposal at NMBCA to conserve a threatened regional endemic, and they funded it, because I made the argument that, hey, they're in wetlands and mangroves. And if you save the mangroves for the duck, which is our flagship species that the local people care about and are concerned about, you're going to save the wetlands for the migratory birds. So, they had the wisdom and funded actually a couple different projects to grow this program. So the first thing we did was we said, oh, we need a curriculum. We need to teach people about wetlands, why they're important, what you can do to conserve them. So it took us 3 years to write this curriculum. We had a collaborative group of writers. We came up with all kinds of really fun hands-on activities to do in the classroom and in the field. And we wrote the book. And then once we had the book published, I went to Herb and said, okay, we have the book published. I'll quit my job and I'll do this full time if you'll pay me half time to start doing these workshops. And he said, okay. So that's how I got started working full time in the Caribbean. We started doing these workshops. And we had hands-on activities using different learning styles and all the senses, getting people outside and doing things, where you're having fun but learning at the same time. And we started developing more and more materials, bird ID cards, coloring books, posters. We have a whole program focused on seabirds, which I don't even have time to talk about today. But we started developing these bird ID cards for the different islands. And again, people might not have the money to buy a field guide, but you can give them a bird ID card, and you've got pretty much most of the common birds you're going to see. We developed a fabulous puppet show. The Bahamas National Trust did this. There was 2 kids learning about the wetland from Environmental Eddie. And this is Environmental Eddie. And of course, Harry the hunter, he's interested in the wetlands for different reasons. He wants to shoot ducks. But they overhear one day developer Dan in the wetland, and he's going to come in and build a housing project. And so, the 2 kids ran to Environmental Eddie and said, what do we do? What do we do? And so he became the environmental ninja and put on his cape. And, he went and talked to developer Dan, and the community said, hey, you can have your development, but why don't you put it over here and not in the wetland? We have our wetland bird friends down here and they need a home. And so developer Dan said, okay. And, we had a little chant for the kids to say about, save the wetlands. And, we ran that puppet show. We have to revive that. We haven't had it. You guys probably don't even know about it. Yeah. Anyway, it's fantastic. We have to revive it. But, we had all kinds of really great stuff to get kids excited about birds and wetlands and learn about them. So once we started having all these materials, we started doing these train the trainer workshops, where we were teaching teachers and educators, both in schools and in NGOs, to go out and raise awareness and teach others. So we've done them in almost every Caribbean island. Most recently, we were in Jamaica and Barbados. And a big thing that we do in all of our workshops is get people outside birding. And it's just amazing when you show them birds through binoculars or a scope, and they're like, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And like, gee, I drove by that wetland every day. I didn't know there were these beautiful birds there. And it's like, bling, something goes off in their head. Those endorphins, go off, and it's like they're hooked. We've never had anybody that didn't enjoy the birding. And so it really, really shows the connection that you can make through birds. And so our philosophy, our role as environmental educators is to encourage people to reach the next stage. If they've never met a bird, introduce them to one. If they know a little bit about birds, expand their knowledge. If they know about birds, nurture their caring and appreciation. And if they care about birds, encourage appropriate actions, motivate them, and provide tools. So that's some of our philosophy. And so what have we learned? Well, we've learned that birds are excellent ambassadors for nature conservation. They're easy to observe, beautifully colored, endlessly fascinating behaviors, and they're part of our natural world that, we all know that everybody can enjoy. So as educators, introduce children to birds, and birds and birding can serve as the gateway or springboard to a lifelong interest in nature and environment and lead to conservation. We've seen this happen. We've seen kids that have taken our programs go into working in environmental conservation. And of course, not everybody's going to do that, but hopefully, some of them are going to go, as Drew was saying last night, they're going to go to a town hall meeting when their local wetland is threatened, and they're going to fight for that wetland. They're going to maybe vote for a minister that's more environmentally aware and friendly than one that's not. So, there's just impacts at all levels. So we have lots of different ways that we do bird education. We've celebrated a Caribbean Endemic Bird Festival, again, raising awareness about the incredible diversity of birds and endemics, and the fact that have pride in those. I've visited islands and been hiking and said, I always chat with everybody I meet. And I say, oh, we're here to see your parrot. And have you seen it? No, I've never seen it. So it's like, again, we all don't appreciate what's in our own backyard, but just making them aware that you have something special on your islands and, you need to take care of it. People will pay money to come see these birds. So you need to take care of them and get to know them and enjoy them. So that's what we're all about is raising that awareness. So we've done campaigns. We do now Endemic Bird of the Day. That was something that started during the pandemic. We've covered 131 of the 180 birds so far, but we've got the coloring book, coloring pages, all kinds of resources and activities that you can download for free. It's all about getting people out birding and then doing environmental activities like cleanups, restorations, tree planting events. This is Anderson Jean from Haiti planting trees with some kids. He's an environmental hero there. We also celebrate World Migratory Bird Day in the fall, and we say it's welcome home migrants. They're there for like 8-9 months of the year. They're really our birds, not your birds here, right? And so, shout out to Sue Bonfield and her team at Environment for the Americas, who provides us with incredible materials every year with conservation themes. Everybody appreciates it so much. And, people welcome home their winter visitors and definitely start to notice them and pay attention to them and start incorporating them into their environmental programs. And we have, for example, a partner who we gave a small grant to develop signage in Montserrat. And, the message is, let's be good hosts to our winter visitors. Let's provide them with a home, make sure they've got a place to rest and feed. We've also had fantastic partnership with Cornell Lab of Ornithology over the years. Jeff Gerbracht has been instrumental in helping us with our bird monitoring programs, and also Jennifer Fee with development of Bird Salute Caribbean. The goal is to develop a strong conservation ethic in youth and promote commitment to environmental stewardship by increasing knowledge and interest in birds. And we provide workshop kits. Everything we do, we try to do in 3 languages. We've donated over 2,000 binoculars. Some we've been able to raise from grant money. Others we've had fantastic donations from Optics for the Tropics, Ideal Wild, Birders Exchange, and Vortex Optics is a partner for us. So we're trying to get, binoculars into the hands of our partners and into schools and so forth. And, we hear back, this is having an impact. They're reaching rural areas. People are being made more aware. Dr. Leo Douglas, he is a past president of Birds Caribbean. He did a postdoc with Pete Marra where we actually did a study where we were following up. We had control schools and experimental schools, and the experimental schools we did what we called a 2-day bird science intervention where we exposed kids to learning about birds. The control schools, they didn't get that program. And we did pre and post quizzes and then followed up with them 1 year later, 3 years later to see what they learned. And it stuck. Those kids still remembered that experience and were impacted by it. They still remembered how many endemic birds there were in Jamaica. And, so, that's a really fantastic project to show the impact of the work. We've had things like in Carriacou, a very small island part of Grenada, where the entire island learned about birds, and they declared a wetland a sanctuary. Habitat cleanups, kids learning about birds. So that's a lot of the bird education that we do. Then we also, of course, need the science and the monitoring. We need to know about what are the most important sites for these migratory shorebirds and resident waterbirds and shorebirds. So we started what we called the Caribbean Waterbird Census in 2010. And we had developed this model where we do this train the trainer workshop. We give them the knowledge and the skills and the tools and the equipment. And then we follow that up with a small grant program, because we found that if you do the training and then you say, well, good luck, do great out there, often they don't have the funding to do anything. So now we always follow up our trainings with small grants, and they may get between $1,000 and $10,000 to do something, go out and start a monitoring program, train the trainers, do your own training workshop, do some education, do a restoration, do a cleanup, so they get money to do something on their island. And our hope is that the programs are institutionalized by the NGOs and governments. It doesn't always happen, but it has happened in some cases where now it becomes part of their work plan. So wait a minute, I've only been talking for 30 minutes. So no way, I'm not stopping yet. I got a little bit more to do. Yep, I've got a timer, I'm watching my timer. Okay, I'm going as fast as I can. All right, so yeah, so we've had this program going now, and we've got lots of people participating. We've done webinars, teaching people how to identify water birds and shorebirds. We've got this manual, it's in English, Spanish, and French now. We've provided resources. Everybody knows how hard it is to identify shorebirds. So, we really work with them on their shorebird ID and help them to learn shorebirds. We've got lots of downloadable free resources. Shorebird poster, the Ken lineup of shorebirds, coloring books, activity books. And again, we've got our local partners, they're out there. This is National Environment Planning Agency out with a bunch of kids, and they're monitoring their local wetland. The Environmental Awareness Group in Antigua and Barbuda, they got a small grant for us, and they put up billboards at 6 of their wetlands, which have been used as dumping grounds, to say, hey, don't dump here. We've got birds, this is their home. So, we're seeing lots of great, outcomes and impacts from these projects. And then, of course, the CWC is giving us incredibly important data. We're filling knowledge gaps about the bird status and distribution and migration patterns. We're identifying areas that have potential for special designations, wizard sites, important bird areas. We're identifying priority areas for migratory shorebirds and waterbirds. And of course, we're engaging people across the region to take part in this Caribbean waterbird census. So here's just one example from Cargill, salt ponds in Bonaire. The entire southern third of the island is salt ponds. And we started an intensive monitoring program there, and CWC, our partner, went out and did 100 point counts a few times on this pond. And it really was serendipitous. Again, we went there to do a wetlands workshop, and Cargill Salt Pond sent one of their staff to the workshop. And he said, hey, I think you should come visit our salt ponds. We got a lot of birds there. I said, okay, really? Great. All right. So we went there and we're like, oh my God, you have a lot of birds, a lot of shorebirds here. And, they didn't even realize how important their site was for shorebirds. So we started doing these counts, and it was clear that it was a really important site. And so we did analyses, and we showed that greater than 20,000 shorebirds are there a year. It's a really important site for short-billed dowitchers and red knots and breeding snowy plovers. So we went through the process, and we were able to get it designated as a wizard site, and they were very excited about that. The person that attended the workshop was great, but his managers and his bosses were like, wait, what is this all about? You want to come on our property and do what? Like they were very skeptical, very suspicious, but over time they learned to trust us. And then eventually now they're funding us to do a project to develop signs for all the wetlands on the entire island. So this is what happens when you build partnerships and you get to know people. Like the businesses start to become your partner, and they get excited about the work that you're doing. So that's really, really great. The Caribbean waterbird census, again, like I'm saying, it's really revealing important sites, that have high diversity and abundance of shorebirds. Monte Cristi is a really large wetland complex on the north side of Dominican Republic. Our local partner there is Grupo Acción Ecológica. And Maria was one of our very first people that took our training workshop and has been doing CWC surveys since then. The condition of the sites are highly variable, but we have high abundances of shorebirds and waterbirds there. But we've shown an important site. We're now going for wizard designation for this site as well. But just her presence there, she found out about illegal trapping that was happening there. Traps are placed at low tide and they're hidden. And when the tide rises, the birds don't see them. And she was finding out that flamingos and other water birds were being trapped and taken to hotels. to be, sit out by the pool for the tourists to enjoy. So she removed 300 traps in 2019, over 600 in 2020. So again, just having a presence at these sites is really, really important to keep up with what's going on there and all the threats. This is a fantastic story about the restoration of Ashton Lagoon. Again, I went to Union Island, did a wetlands workshop there, visited their local wetland, and this is what it looked like. I'm like, oh my God, what happened to this place? And they told us, well, in 1997, the government allowed a developer to come in and build he wanted to put a golf course on top of the largest remaining mangroves in the whole country and dredge the lagoon with the seagrass beds and coral reefs to put in a 300 berth marina. And so they dredged out the lagoon, they built the causeway, and then they declared bankruptcy and left. So this is what they were left with. There's no water circulation, so all the runoff is going there. And the local fishers, the people were so sad because their once pristine and beautiful lagoon looked like this. And they said, hey, can you help us? So we said, okay, we'll try. So again, we went to NMBCA and we wrote a grant for a participatory planning workshop. And we did a 3-day workshop. We brought all the stakeholders together from the community, the fishers, even the government ministers came. And we said, what do we need to do? And we did a problem tree, a solution tree. We had a vision for what we wanted the place to look like. Then we got another NMBCA to actually do the grant, but then the government in St. Vincent said, nope, can't do it. We might have another developer come along and uptake continue the development. For 5 years, we kept going back and asking for permission. They wouldn't give permission. We finally lost the NMBCA grant, but our local partners, Sustainable Grenadines, Inc., they were able to find other donors, and they raised over $1 million to do the restoration. And this is what it looks like now. They've opened up the causeways. They've got water circulation going everywhere. They've got bird blinds up. They've got trails for birding. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. To me, it's like a model for, what you can do. There's so many damaged sites, but there's hope. You can restore them, and the biodiversity will come back. So it's just like, when I went to the opening of this, I was like, oh my God, this is the most emotional moment of my life, because we've been working on this from 2006 was when I first went there, and it was in 2019 that they, finished the major restoration work. So it's perseverance and commitment, and you got to be in it for the long haul to get things like this done, but they can be done. So of course we support research and monitoring. We do a lot of work. We have an endangered and threatened species working group. So we're trying to do research and monitoring on those endemic species that are threatened. Some of you may have heard about the volcano that hit St. Vincent a couple of years ago. It really devastated the forest and impacted the St. Vincent parrot and the critically endangered whistling warbler. Everybody was wondering, well, what's happened? What's the status? Well, the forestry department couldn't really answer because they didn't have baseline data on, what the population was in the first place. So now we have a grant from the Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund to help the forestry staff with monitoring training. So we're training them in monitoring their local birds, land birds, but also the migratory birds. So we've been going there. Last year we did a land bird monitoring program there last year. So we have a new NMBC grant. We're now focusing on land birds, finally. And Maya is our land bird monitoring program coordinator. And so again, we're using our model that seems to work, train the trainers, and then small grants to jumpstart projects. And this program has 3 components. It's training in land bird monitoring techniques, and then also bird banding, building capacity to band birds, and then also MODIS. And Adrian in the panel is going to talk more about this. I don't have time. So just to mention that this is ongoing right now. We have just started our second NBCA grant to do that. But here's just a couple of quick pictures. 2 years ago, there were no permanent MODIS stations in the Caribbean. Now there's 11 under our project. We put up 6, and there's in the next 2 years, we'll put up another 15 or 20. So it's incredible how that technology is taken off, and people are really excited about it because, again, it's a great teaching tool and, of course, a great research tool. So we try to do the awards of small grants when we get grants, but we've also established our own grant programs thanks to donations, which honor people that have either passed away or are supporting us with an endowed fund like the James Cushland Fund. So every year we're able to award grants anywhere from $500 to $10,000 to do local conservation work, which is just so important. And so we mentor our partners in how to write a grant proposal. and how to write a report and, all of that process. And we see the impacts, they go out and they're now getting their own funding and raising more money than we are. So, it's fantastic. We're thrilled to see that success. Hugely important. And then just one last project I want to tell you a little bit about. I talked about the importance of alleviating poverty and the need to show the economic benefits of birding and bird tourism, that these areas, these natural areas have value. Don't bulldoze them and put up another, sandals resort or whatever. Like, people are coming here to see your birds, so don't develop in environmentally sensitive areas. And so we've started to develop a project that we're calling the Caribbean Birding Trail. And yeah, you can see Leo Douglas here with Hurlitz Davis. He's another grad student at Pete Mares. They actually were birding with President Jimmy Carter. This is a number of years ago, which is really cool. So we have the Caribbean Birding Trail Project. Its mission is to create and promote nature-based, authentic experiences that engage visitors and locals with the unique birds of the islands and connect them to the extraordinary places and diverse cultures and people of each island. So it's like an interpretive platform where birds represent the diversity and uniqueness of Caribbean heritage. So we want to promote everything that's, authentic and unique about the birds and through birds. So we have developed a program. We have worked with trainers from the National Association of Interpretation. So we're not just teaching bird ID, but we're teaching our guides how to tell stories and make that connection between the birds and the resource. These birds have a story, and this is why it's important, and you've got to make that emotional connection for people to appreciate their value. So far we've done CBT guide training workshops, 5-day intensive workshop with guides in these different countries. Our most recent one was in the Turks and Caicos just this last October. Just really virtually no birding community there. But as a result of the training that we did there, we target a lot of tour companies. They do have a lot of ecotourism there in terms of snorkeling and boating and swimming and bone fishing, things like that. But none of them did bird tourism. They didn't know it was a thing. So now they're adding bird tourism as an offering and able to make money off of that. Previously, there was no birding culture, as I mentioned. Now all the trainees are out there birding all the time. We have set up a WhatsApp group that now has 50 people in it. And they're practicing their bird ID and posting every day what they're seeing. So this is how we grow the local birding culture. So we have a website, a really great website, and on it we list guides. So guides that have taken our training and have built up their skills. They can list their business there, and we refer people all the time. Oh, I get people write to me all the time. Where can I find a guide? Okay, visit our website, find the guide right there. So again, we've had good success with this. Vaughn Francis, he was at our very first training workshop in Grenada. He said, this workshop helped me develop a passion for something I didn't even know I had a passion for. And he's now a top-rated guide on TripAdvisor for his bird and nature tours. And again, people just said, I just had this blind spot. I didn't know birding was a thing. And now I love it, and I'm doing it, and I'm making money from it. We work with sometimes foresters. After they retire, they've had a long career working as foresters. And then now they guide full-time. They've been guiding on the side. Now they're guiding full-time. Bertrand Jean-Baptiste, Dr. Birdius, we call him. He says he can make in 2 weeks what he made an entire year as a forester guiding. So, people can make a living from this. And that's really important to show the government, hey, there's economic benefits. So he did this
Okay. What I'm gonna say. Are you
little
ready?
video for us.
Well, we had a fantastic day.
Yeah.
Thanks to Birds Caribbean for giving me the skills and the tools to become what I am in the bird world. Woo! But yeah, but it does Caribbean.
He made that little video as a shout out for us on our anniversary. And then this is another one. I'm almost done, Paul. Sorry. I've totally blown your schedule, but let me just share this last one. This is a little video we made about one of our partners.
Began birding in 2011. Prior to that, I knew nothing about birds, but I was tasked with creating these these bird cards of Antigua and Barbuda. And within 3 months, I learned so much about birds and appreciated them so much more. When Jordan was born, his first words were actually, well, his first word was bird. And he attended his first Birds Caribbean conference at the age of 7 months. He's an avid birder, I think even more than me, and I really want to thank Birds Caribbean for all the training that you've given to me and that I've been able to pass on to my son. Yeah, may you exist for many, many more years, training people within the region to love and appreciate and conserve our endemic birds.
Anyway, that's just a sample of, we've got lots of great videos. Okay, so just quickly, conclusions and lessons learned. I think we've learned from experience that our regional approach to building capacity works, training workshops and small grants. It's really all about the people. Ultimately, conservation is not going to happen unless you listen to and engage with and involve local people. So it's about building relationships and building trust and perseverance and patience. And it's really a long-term investment. And people will take action when they love and care about something. So we all need to work on connecting with people and introducing them to the birds and connecting them to a community that cares and being part of something that is bigger. I think that's something that we all want to do. We all want to feel like our life has meaning and what we're doing has value, and everybody feels that. So, you know, even the most skeptical person you can turn them around often and bring them to understanding how important birds and nature are. So again, we've learned that birds are a great way to connect people to nature and get them contributing to conservation. We've learned that it's really important to be flexible and nimble to build on your successes. Sometimes opportunities come up and you have to jump on them. Sometimes there are bad things that happen. You learn about a development threat and you have to drop everything to respond to it. You know, so you have to be flexible. You can't go on like, oh yeah, I've got to collect data on this. Well, meanwhile, your site is being sold to developer and, you know, it's going to be gone. So, you know, you really have to think about what are the priorities. We've had a lot of serendipitous things that have happened that have led then to good things happening with conservation. So you have to be open to those and ready to take advantage of them. For international partners at R2R, I would say find ways to work together, you know, through overlapping priorities and species. Maybe it's not the migratory birds that are highest priority for your partner, but as we talked about in the discussion yesterday, you can find those shared interests and where it's really all about the saving habitat that both species are using. And, you know, really think carefully about your investments. What's really going to make the difference? I think that's important. You know, do we really need more data? Do we really need more science? Or do we, you know, like it's time to take some action. Like, let's not do yet another study to show blah, blah, blah. Let's like, you know, there's some urgent conservation work that needs to be done. Like, let's prioritize that. So I think it's really important to think carefully about that. And I really haven't heard much talk about bird education at this conference. It's all human dimensions and social science, but like, where's the bird education? Like, don't forget how important that is. So partner with us. We need funding and we need support for our programs, particularly in Cuba, where of course we can't use federal funds and we need more staff. We're a really small organization. Our annual budget is only about $500,000 a year. So we get an incredible amount of work done, but we urgently need more money to do more. This is some of the amazing team behind all the great work. Of course, we have evolving board members, changing board members all the time, but this is our current board that's helping us. And then we have amazing team behind all the great work. I was the only paid staff up until recently. We now have a full-time communications manager and operations manager, and then we have part-time or people that are paid off of grants. Again, you know, if we had more money, we could pay the people to do all this great work. That's so, so important. This is a small sample of some of our partners that we work with and funders and donors. We've had incredible support over the years from Fish and Wildlife Service, NMBCA, Canadian Wildlife Service, you know, some private foundations, Critical Ecosystem Partnership Fund. So there's just, you know, we hope this will just continue to grow. And take note that our next conference is in the Dominican Republic this July. If you've never been to one of our conferences, you absolutely have to come. It's a great place to meet partners that you want to work with and network with. It's a 5-day conference. There's lots of pre and post conference workshops and mid-conference field trip. They're really energizing conferences where you're just going to meet the most, amazing, passionate, dedicated people. And then connect with us, sign up for our mailing list to get our monthly newsletter. Follow us on social media. We're really active. We do put out tons of stuff on social media on our YouTube channel. Become a member, join our listserv. So I think that's it. I'm only a few minutes over, right, Paul? Thank you so very much for listening, and we invite you to connect with us. Sorry about going over. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much. Thank you, Lisa. That was great. The next panel, please come down. Don't wait to be invited. Get ready. You can tell Lisa has passion for what she does. If you're working on a species that has a limiting factor or needs work in that region, I suggest you contact Lisa. She can make things happen. She's built an incredible partnership. And since she's only 39 years old, I guess I haven't known her for 20 or 25 years. I'm sorry to have to try to speed this up, but I'm trying to get you all out and not steal too much time from the next couple of panels and presenters. Great, thank you so much. That was quick. That was awesome. I can tell you next time I'll make sure we have good weather and we won't be having anybody use Max. So we have these switching back and forth. No offense to Max, I know, but okay. Esmeralda Bravo will be the moderator for today's panel. We have a great list of folks who will introduce themselves or she will introduce them. I'm gonna make sure the mics are on. Not doing with that.
Well, hello and welcome again to this panel that is Diverse Perspectives in Partnerships. This panel aims to provide a comprehensive view of the crucial role of international partnerships to achieve the recovery of bird species. And today we are thrilled to have 5 wonderful people representing exceptional conservation efforts. And I don't know if is Edwin around. Yes, I want to thank Edwin from Arizona Game and Fish Department, who will kindly be assisting or supporting us with translation when it's needed. So without further ado, we'll turn over to the panelists for their presentations. And after that, the floor will be open for a Q&A session. I think Noemi is gonna be the first. Yeah. You wanna do it on the day or?
Thank you, Esmeralda. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel with you and my partners here. I am Noemi Moreno. I am part to the Audubon Americas team. That is an international program of the National Audubon Society. Today, I'm going to tell about the project that I have been coordinating for 3 years approximately. So thank you, Esmeralda. Next, please. This process, the National Conservation Plan for Birds in Colombia, started in 2020. And we have this process with 2 local partners. One partner is the RENOA, is the Red Nacional de Observadores de Aves. This is a network that integrates more than 20 ornithological associations in Colombia. And also we have other partners, the Humboldt Institute, that is the research institute that is linked with the environmental ministry, like the government. So in this process, we had 2 committees, like advisor and scientific committees that involve different people represents from academia and economy and social sectors. So the goal and objective of this process was update and create a new strategy, but it was important to involve new actors with different visions. So yeah, and this was important for this process. And all this process was developed through conservation standard methodology. Next, please. So we have more than 40 virtual and in-person workshops, and this to permit a lot of participation, around more than 2,000 people. And this is interesting because we have a representative from different sectors, from academia, because it was so important, but from economy and social sectors, an NGO organization, and also was important the Ignition communities and the government. And the government was so important too, because the idea with this plan or strategic is to develop policies like local and national level. So, and this new plan of use ENCA, I'm sorry, I don't explain, the ENCA is the Spanish initials, that the Estrategia Nacional para la Conservación de las Aves. So this is the plan and the ENCA. So we had this new plan that integrate diverse perspectives with the same objective, to achieve environmental, social, and economic development for the country through birds. Next, please. So we have this new ENCA, or this new plan for Colombia, and we have different perspectives that I said, and this was so important for us. So the plan integrates 5 strategic lines that you see in the presentation, in the slide. So for the conservation of resident and migratory birds of the country. So these reflect the representation, that work that had all these actors in the different all actors in the different works and in different landscapes too. So, and also for them was important this build or to participate in this creation to this new ENCA, because they need an opportunity and they find through the ENCA to continue strengthening their work. For example, in this strategy, I try to explain too, but that reflect other perspectives from the other actors. But for example, the influence, productive, and strategic service sectors, we had involved in this a lot of representatives from the economy and social sector that are interested to have bird-friendly practices. For example, the regenerative agriculture that Jorge Velázquez mentioned 2 days ago in the panel. So this is the one example that we had in Colombia, in the Valle del Cauca, where we work with a cane sugar business or farmer that they want to implement best practices and in Colombia. And this was and this process was so interesting for other sectors. For example, we have now infrastructure sector that are so interested how they could to participate in this implementation moment, because now we are in the implementation ENCA. So this is interesting how we could involve new sectors and in the other sectors, but to continue strengthen their work and also the conservation birds. Another example is with the strategic line, like the strengthened advocacy mechanism in the local level, is the voices from the local associations that they work with Indonesian communities, and for them it's so important to show the ancestral knowledge and the relation that they had with birds in their territories. So the ENCA is like a framework for them to continue to work in their territories, and also how they could implement actions in their territories. Next, please. Thank you. So I think one of the main challenges of this process was to see different perspectives, yeah, like in the same table. But I think for this process was necessary to be clear with all actors the objective or the goal. Yes, because in this case, the goal was the conservation of birds. So the idea was, okay, what would I do from what is our work? And so I think was positive when we sit in the same chair and try to think how who could or which action we could use in the with different perspectives, but in the same purpose. So now we have in the implementation phase that I told before. So obviously this is a big challenge, but also we have a positive alliance because we have new partners. Yeah, we work with our local partners, but now we have more partners in the economy and social sector, and also academia, and also Indonesian communities. So this is positive for us. So in this year, we are working with our partners. We continue work with this network like Renoa that had a lot of association inside in different regions. So we continue work with them and the Institute of Humboldt too. The idea to reach out to local and national governments to promote the development of public policies. And the other step is to continue work with economy and social sector too, and involve the new sector that is come us to have a big projects to implement different action in this in this process. For example, I told about the infrastructure and tourism sector. And finally, the other interest from people that participate in this process was to create a platform that support us or help us to have like to follow the indicators that we put it in this plan. So now we are working in this platform, and the idea is to have the launch this year and try to have the different training with the people, how you could use this platform, and also how you could up information and share with us. But this platform is for all people, not just like to involve communities, local communities, business, business people, academia, and among others. So yeah, and that's it. Thank you so much.
Hello, good morning. My name is Osber Hinojosa Huerta. I'm the director of the Coastal Solution Fellows Program at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And I will tell you a little bit about the program and what we have been doing in the last 5 years. And thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you, Esmeralda. I'm so excited to be here this morning and sharing the panel with these amazing colleagues. So the main reason why this Coastal Solution Fellows Program was created is because we want to recover birds, right? And especially shorebirds. And we have been concentrating along the Pacific Flyway of Latin America, from Mexico to Chile. And when the lab started to develop this program, of course, we started to talk with the usual suspects and shorebird experts, conservationists, but also we started conversations with experts in policy, in social, human dimensions, but also architects and engineers, so different different disciplines to help us understand how can we better achieve conservation, but also from different sectors, of course, academia and NGOs as usual and agencies, but also from the private sector and from producers directly. And there were many challenges, of course, in conservation, but some of the key elements that we want to address and that we identified through that process is that there's been a lack of collaboration between sectors, economic and social sectors for conservation, a tremendous need to increase capacity for effective conservation throughout Latin America, and also the need to improve governance and conservation impact on the ground and be able to measure that and through theory of change, improve what we're doing, right? So that's how the program was born as a collaboration between the Packard Foundation and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology in what we are calling phase one, the first 6 years of the program. And our main goal is to improve coastal resiliency along the Pacific Flyway of Latin America for birds and for people through two main strategic pathways, cross-sectoral collaborations and capacity building for early career leaders. And yeah, it's working. Part of the model of what we're trying to achieve is to be able to create capacity at each of those priority sites all along the flyway. And the idea is that partners on each of these sites on the ground develop the capacity to really implement these effective conservation projects. So every year we select 6 fellows, but they come along a team of mentors and collaborators and partners from different sectors and disciplines. And for us, this is critical. It's not only the early career professionals we're supporting, but building a network for conservation that can last in the long term. So in the last 5 years, we have now over 200 leaders and experts from different sectors and disciplines. So who are our fellows? And we have 2 in the meeting, Natalia Martinez and Eliana Montenegro from Argentina and Ecuador. And the fellows are early career professionals from diverse backgrounds. So in our fellowship, we have, of course, ornithologists and biologists, but we also have anthropologists, sociologists, experts in policy, architects, and engineers coming from different sectors themselves. And they are all Latin American citizens that have an affiliation with Cornell during the fellowship the last 2 years, but they are all working in their countries. And in the fellowship, we provide them with $80,000 so they can implement a project on the ground. And we also have a very intense training program through in-person retreats, but also online sessions. And through our training program, we target some of the what we consider key skills for conservation, which include governance, human dimensions, strategic communication, fundraising. So that's our program. That's the concentration of our program. And we also encourage them and guide them to implement what we're calling the Coastal Solutions Model for Conservation, which includes or starts by identifying threats at priority sites and trying to solve those, and develop a solution that is specific, effective, and with measurable conservation impact, and includes the participation of diverse sectors, and also that develops and incorporates governance mechanisms to support the long-term success of their initiatives, and that creates synergies with existing conservation initiatives. So far, we have 5 cohorts of fellows. So we have 30 fellows that have been working in 9 countries along the Pacific Flyway from Mexico to Chile in 37 priority sites. What's really exciting is that they're already achieving amazing impact on the ground. There's been over 180,000 hectares with conservation benefits from the creation of nature sanctuaries and establishing conservation easements to reaching agreements, for example, with shrimp farmers. So now we are thinking about scaling up the program and addressing other flyways in addition to the Pacific Flyway. And I'm really excited about the Road to Recovery effort. I really think this is an amazing platform to scale up conservation at a continental scale. But just echoing what Lisa and others have been mentioning, I think we really need to move fast from biological research and social science to conservation impact and social action. Thank you.
¿Quieres desde aquí? All right, well, good morning. Thank you also for inviting me to this panel. Well, I am Juliana Bedoya Guzman from the Group of Ecology and Island Conservation, or Conservación de Islas for short. I am the CIBER project director. If you don't know Conservación de Islas, this is a Mexican NGO established 25 years ago, and is dedicated to island restoration with a particular focus on eradicating invasive mammals, conserving several species, restoring plant communities, ensuring island biosecurity, and promoting environmental education and influencing public policies. We are based in Ensenada, very close to San Diego, in Northwest Mexico, and we actively work on islands across the country. Over the past 25 years, we have cultivated an extensive collaboration network with national and international partners, as you can see here, including fishing cooperatives, universities, government agencies, and other NGOs. And well, we have been collaborating in several international projects, but today I would like to share with you an ambitious silver restoration project that was conducted between Mexico and United States. And this initiative was focused to restore species of common concern in partnership with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and the National Audubon Society, and also the Fondo Mexicano para la Conservación de la Naturaleza. We collaborated in this project from 2013 to 2017. It was a project of 5 years, and it was one of the biggest projects that we have had in our organization. So the main goal of this project was to restore nesting colonies on several Mexican Pacific islands, and all of the ones that you see in the slide. Many of these, at least 6 species of them, are considered tipping point species for the Route to Recovery initiative, such as the pelagic cormorant, the western gull, the Squirt's murrelet, the Guadalupe murrelet, Caraveris murrelet, and the ashy storm petrel. We have in Mexico many of the main colonies of these species. And well, the project activities included implementing social attraction techniques, habitat restoration, reducing human disturbance, monitoring population size and productivity of the breeding colonies, but also environmental education and outreach with fishing communities. And well, the project was very successful. We attracted back several extirpated colonies and updated breeding numbers and information. We reduced the human disturbance on some of these islands, and also we increased the awareness of seabirds in many of these fishing communities. Well, we think that the key components that contributed to this success included this initial foundation of mutual respect and also trust between partners. We designed together the project, and we also developed the project during the 5 years, and we had a lot of feedback all over the 5 years. But we also have this training and exchange experiences among all the partners. Several teams from Mexico went to United States to participate in this management training program in Audubon Society in Maine. And we also, the colleagues from Cornell's, they gave us several workshops about recording and data analysis, both in the field and also in the office. And we conducted regular communication, we had a regular communication, but also annual meetings in person to discuss results, to have more feedback, and also to address challenges. But also this gave us the opportunity to build a strong relationship, not just professionally, but also as friends. And something important was also the establishment of a strong relationship with these fishing cooperatives that they help us a lot in the field. Well, these projects open the opportunities for other strong partnerships with other colleagues that also are working with tipping point species in the USA. So currently we are developing a conservation action plan for the murrelets that we share between Mexico and the US. We also are part of the Ashy Storm Petrel Working Group, which has been going for 3 years already. And we are assessing its breeding population across all the range. And finally, during the last 3 years, we had undertaken a project to translocate black-footed albatross eggs from Midway Atoll in Hawaii to Guadalupe Island in Mexico, aiming to mitigate the effects of climate change. So now that we are part of these initiatives, I will bring all what I have learned during the last years, and I hope to integrate these working groups for these tipping point species. So thank you.
Thank you to be here. Today, what I'm going to present is my experience working in the last 3 decades in land bird conservation in Western Mexico. As you can see in the map, I'm from Jalisco. I'm also a professor of the University of Guadalajara. And I work, my main projects are inside of this protected area that is called Sierra de Manantlan Biosphere Reserve. And this is one of the huge area that is located between the state of Jalisco and Colima. And it's wonderful because in this we can have like 8 type of ecosystem in a different altitudinal gradient that goes from the tropical lowland to the temperate forest. But something that is very important is that we have detected the threats for biodiversity. And some of them are like fires. We have a lot of fires. Also, we have deforestation of areas due to the agave plantation and tequila drinkers. And also, we have the livestock problems. So I have been working in an interdisciplinary way. I'm not the only one that I work in this area. We always are like 47 professors with different disciplines, economic, sociologists, environmentalists, and ecologists, and all these things. So our duty is how we can accomplish the conservation of the biodiversity, thinking in the socio-ecological perspective, and thinking also about the adaptive management. So every project that we have there, we have to deliver a product that can save the biodiversity, but also accomplish the socio-economic things. As you see, that area in the dark blue, we have a lot of concentration of these long migrant birds. But also, if you see the maps that I show in a green, you will see the dark green areas. And we have at the highest endemic species located there in Mexico. And not just for birds, you can see mammals, amphibians, and reptiles. So for me, it's like very compromised to save long distance migrants and also the endemic species. And as you can see in this table, I see the challenges, the threat, but also like the opportunities, action, and institutions. For instance, we have impact. Oh, it's kind of, can I put? Ooh. Okay, neon, like this. Okay, so for instance, we have some threats that I mentioned, but also we want to promote sustainable practices like prescribe fires that will involve local communities and advocate for robust environment policies. So institutions are from the local level to the federal level also. Thinking about the climate change and the forest fire, we want to increase, we don't want to increase the weather events, but we know that this will increase. And so we need to give some mitigation and adaptation strategies like fire management, habitat. And for the first time, we promote and we establish this prescribed fire inside of the Biosphere Reserve in a national protected area, working with CONAFOR, CONAM, that federal agencies, but also convince the people that live and honor the land. I think also collaboration and partnership development is it is an opportunity, but still we need to increase this to establish collaboration and share the best practices. And I think we, as a professor, and when we are in the field, we share the knowledge. They know a lot, and we know some kind. And so it's the same. We have different institutions, and also we have the local and international conservation point of view. So we need to make a balance and tension between local and international issues. So we develop programs integrating local solutions and also contributing to the international objectives. And the last one we do, and I do, education and awareness raising to raise this. I develop educational program, training workshop, festivals, and campaigns to engage the community. And also this idea, the local idea, it helped me a lot with people that you are here, like Partners in Fly and Susan Bonfield from the EFTA and Cornell and Conavio. You know, we are not alone. We are a team. So today, what I want to present is one example, because I work with different projects, doing Agave project, Livestock project, but I bring this about fires. And as you see in the map, the green areas means the distribution of the temperate forest in Mexico. But this forest ecosystem has high pressure because it extracts the wood, you know, that provide a lot of wood, but also it's the one of the main forests that has been increasing the fires. In that beautiful forest, we have, at least in this part in Mexico, 24 species of hummingbirds, endemic, resident, and the long distance. So what I wanted to know is how this fire affect hummingbirds after, like a secondary effect. Once you have the fire, what is there after that? So I have been studying for a long time the effect, and now I know how they behave, the populations, and what they need to be conserved. For instance, in this MEDS analysis, I can show that in like migratory hummingbirds have different necessities and from the resident hummingbirds. And for instance, when the long distance hummingbirds are here breeding, in the winter areas, we have fires. And after the fires, we have the raining season. And this combination gives us in September, October, and the rest of the months, a huge amount of flowers that benefits the rufous hummingbird especially. So, but not for resident hummingbirds. So it's something that we need to think how to conserve both, because they seem that behave in a different way and they have different necessities. And as you can see, all the migratory hummingbirds molt the plumage in that place. And they spend long months, if you see, 8 months, 7 months, a year. But now at this time, we know what do they eat, and each, I'm sorry, because it's a very, a lot of data there, but each of hummingbird species, we know the percentage of flowers that they visit. So this information allows to have habitat restoration for conservation of migratory hummingbirds, but I have also to think about resident species. So I'm thankful to U.S. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that in the 2020 gave us support to put in practice this, to accomplish, to work with the land managers in the Sierra de Manantlan, and also implement the prescribed fires. For the first time in Mexico, we provide this, and it's an example to repeat in other protected areas at federal or local level. So something that we have is that we have these 700, more than 700 hectares that implement habitat restoration for hummingbirds, but it wasn't easy, because people that own the land say, but what we are going to have? What is the exchange? What is the benefit? So we have to explain the benefits and how we can accomplish their necessities with our necessities. So once they know what were my necessities and what their necessities, they ask me, please, I feel so proud. They say the chief of the Aguacapan and say, I want that everybody can know how many hummingbirds do we have here. And I say, let's go. What do you need? I need a festival. Okay, so let's try and do the festival. And Susan Bofield has been very supportive to do this with me and have this international perspective, and also with Edwin. Edwin, thank you so much for all the work that you have been putting in the last months. And it has been Partners in Flight a key to develop and be strong with this project. So, and then the last one, you can see my partners that go from the local indigenous women, children in the bottom, and the programs, environmental education like Embamigo Salado, Gira, the juntas intermunicipalities, these are projects that we develop in my university to accomplish the conservation necessities and management, and make the management or the adequate management of natural resources. And this is a procedure, bottom to up procedure. And I think it's going very well, because now we have different juntas intermunicipalities in all the state of Jalisco, and also in Yucatan, they are taking this model. What does mean this model? That we don't take the decisions of how to manage the forest. It takes the municipalities. So this is a watershed decision management. It's a different view. It's not political. It's a management point of view of natural resources. So I have to thank to my students, to my professors, you can see Eduardo Santana, and also the people from the community that help us. So the collaboration network has changed through the time in three decades, but something that is remaining always are these three circles: working with research, working with environmental education, and with people all the time. So I start working with all land birds, but now my focus is rufous because it's a steeping species. Thank you. And Andrea.
Hello, everyone. So honored to be here with all of you. I'm Adrian Tosas. I'm president of Birds Caribbean, and my presentation is an example of an international collaboration that has been very successful, and it's a complement of Lisa's presentation previously. I am one of those examples of Caribbean nationals that have grown professionally in this organization. I started under the mentorship of people like Joe Wonderly, Jim Wiley, Herbert Raphael. And in the past 15 years, I have been teaching at the University of Puerto Rico, and currently I feel honored to be the president of this organization. We have many conservation challenges, like Lisa mentioned before, but the thing is that these are very small islands, very delicate ecosystems. The species doesn't have, they are specialized. They have evolved in very delicate ecosystems that if they are distressed or affected, we are losing many endemic species. Like you heard, we have 180 that are not found anywhere else. And our islands are characterized by very delicate economies. We suffer hurricanes and storms very frequently. And of course, there is lack of resources, economical resources that doesn't allow local people to have educational opportunities and job opportunities. So this is a very challenging region where we had to do our conservation work. And the example I'm gonna be sharing with you is how we have come up with ideas to increase capacity building opportunities for our community. We are more than 1,000 people in this community that we are impacting from 31 countries. And there are so many data gaps in the islands. We don't have many people that are working on as ornithologists there. There have been, like, for more than 20 years, people from our organization figuring out how to come up with a birdwatch program. And thanks to NMBCA funding in 2020, we figured out this new land bird monitoring program that will help assess population trends of neotropical migrants and resident land birds, so we can identify key sites for conservation, and local people can use the data to address the threats. So in 2021, we launched the Caribbean Land Bird Monitoring Program. This has been an effort of a team, but I want to highlight our land bird monitoring manager here, Maya, who has done a lot of this work that I'm going to be presenting. The program consists of 3 main pillars, and we have a part that we do capacity training through in-person workshops for people to get to know how to do bird surveys and bird banding, and also to learn how to collect data from bird tracking systems, which I'm going to be talking now. So at the moment, from 2021, we have been able to start the Caribbean Land Bird Monitoring Network using the protocol that was created in Mexico by Conavio, and which we adapted for the Caribbean, and we have now in Spanish and English for our people, the ProAlas protocol that was created for citizen science, so it fits very well our community, and the data goes to eBird, which is very useful, and on all our community is starting to use now. So we have been able to benefit already 64 Caribbean nationals participating in different workshops we have offered in the Dominican Republic, in Puerto Rico, and San Vincent and the Grenadines. And you can see we have some days of the workshops that are in classroom where people learn about this protocol and then on the field. The second main component of our land bird monitoring program is that we provide funding for then our participants to initiate bird surveys on their islands. They're starting their own programs. And up to this point, we have benefited 11 participants from our workshops that have been able to train other people on their islands from 9 different countries. These small grants go up to $10,000. We have the Caribbean bird banding workshops too, that are part of a new network we created. in the United States, you can get bans from the USGS, but what about Caribbean nationals? We had to create our own Caribbean bans as part of this program, and we had to create our own database management system. Already at this point, we have already distributed more than 1,000 bans that are being used in 6 different countries. We have offered 2 in-person trainings on bird banding in the Dominican Republic, the Bahamas, and just next March, we're gonna be having a 3rd of these workshops in Grenada. 31 people have already been benefited by these trainings. And this Caribbean bird banding network also provides opportunities for those that are available or more interested to participate in long-term internships. They can attend for 1 month or more in different bird observatories in North America. We don't have bird observatories in the Caribbean. Hopefully that is something we can figure out in the near future. So they have been training in different 6 observatories like Klamath, Audubon Rockies, Long Point Bird Observatory in Canada, and Williston Conservation Trust. As you can see here, 8 Caribbean nationals have been participated in these internships. And we have also gone a little bit step further, and we're not only giving the training, our own training to these participants, but some of them have already got banding certification from the North American Bounding Council as banders, and one of them already as a trainer. And this is the last component of our land bird monitoring program. Thanks to partners from the Northeast Modus collaboration for sharing their expertise, we were able to start our own Caribbean Modus collaboration. This area of America didn't have any Modus station in 2021 when we started this program. And as you can see from the yellow points, we have already installed 11 stations in 2021. This year, 5 more stations are coming up. And from the red points, you can see that a lot of other potential stations, about 50 more, can come up in the near future. And this is just to finish a summary of everything that we have been doing in this collaboration. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you all for your great and inspiring presentations. So now I will open the floor for some questions from the audience. Yeah, Sarah.
What do you think can you speak briefly to some of the challenges that you think that partners can help you with? Like, what are your biggest needs that you wish you had stronger partnerships for?
I think one of the biggest, okay, there are different. It can be funds to have more people to repeat what we are doing. Because for instance, we can do or cover one area, but there are a huge amount of area that we need to do the same thing, to repeat the same thing. That is one. And the other, to have a better understanding between different countries. It can be if you can read Spanish also, because there are a lot of information or Latin America scientists are wonderful and they are very well qualified. And there is a huge amount of what you call gray published knowledge. Yeah. So I think that will be wonderful. And also, and like to having this meeting, if we can have translator, because it's hard to speak English.
Okay, so I agree with Sarai about the funding. I think to have partners here where mostly our donors are, so it will be wonderful to have this long-term funding, because sometimes you have these big projects, but they ended, and then to continue the effort is quite difficult. And so I think that's the main challenge that we actually have, and also to expand. And well, what I have learned in this meeting these days is that the social component is pretty important. We are just starting with the social work with fishing communities. So having social scientists on board our team, I think that will be very helpful.
I would like to add that the Caribbean region attracts many researchers or scientists that come to the island to work with neotropical migrants. And since we have this shared species, it's a good opportunity to collaborate with local people, since we have so few opportunities to get training or to engage in projects. This will be a very enriching experience for our people, and it will amplify the effects of the research. So it will leave a legacy.
Yeah, I agree completely with all of these points. And from the Coastal Solutions Program perspective, one additional topic is working with multiple partners on how can we align funding that is available at the hemispheric level with this creation of capacities, right? So how do we create mechanisms for supporting the continuity of the amazing work that fellows have been doing? And then thinking about partners in Latin America, one of the things that we are looking for and reaching out is to understanding those needs and threats that are specific to each of the different geographies.
Thank you. I totally agree with my partner's thought. And I think, for example, in Colombia, Audubon Americas work with other regions in the Americas. So sometimes when we have or articulate the work with other partners in other countries, sometimes it's as good to work with our country. So I think it's positive when you articulate the activities or the programs with other countries and trying to show our local partners how it is important these initiatives in the country, but in the other countries too. So yeah, I think, thank you.
Yes, Vic, please.
Thank you very, very much for all your descriptions of your programs and perspectives on things in your countries. I'm wondering, given the focus of R2R, the species level focus of our shared species that we're all trying to save, what's the best way for working groups to reach out to partners in international locations? And I mean that in every way possible. The most effective, most productive, most courteous way to reach out to folks in international locations to invite them to participate in efforts like R2R. What are your recommendations?
I think For instance, I see that there are a lot of wonderful signs in Latin America, and I invite to be part of like this. And sometimes they don't want. And I was wondering why. And they say it's not equal. You know, everything is in English, and it doesn't account of work. So I think that is one important thing. And the other, it is that we need a bridge, puente, a people that can not be just biology, not be just sociology. We need these professionals that link the different interests and understand the different economic, social, cultural, biological interests to solve the problems. And I think we are very few. And we need to create more schools or careers that can involve all these branch to have a better life.
Okay. Well, in our case, that we are very close, where we are located very close to the border, actually, I think attending a lot of these meetings or Congress, I think a good way is that all these amazing meetings that I had the opportunity to attend, is also to bring that opportunity to the countries, to the Latin American countries. For example, I am thinking in this Congress that Pacific Silver groups that sometimes are in Mexico, that's opened the door to many students to share their work and to make these connections and network, and also give the opportunity to express in their language. I think that's a huge difference.
There are some experts in the islands that may not be known because they publish in the great literature or they haven't been published much. So I would recommend the working groups to try to find out who have been working with those species in the Caribbean or Latin America. Maybe this will take some time to find out, but for the Caribbean, Birds Caribbean could be helpful in this. We can tell who are the people that are working with some species like the lesser yellow legs, for example. We will be part of that working group. So we will be happy to connect people in the islands with the people from the Road to the Recovery.
Yeah, and I agree completely with all of those elements. And maybe, yes, it's like reinstating more or less the same, but there are already amazing networks created. There is the NMBCA network and others that exist. So I think that using those channels more for that purpose will help a lot. Northwestern Mexico, I'm thinking the Sonoran joint venture and using that to reach out. I think one key element is that I think there is not understanding yet of Road to Recovery in Latin America, or at least in Mexico, I think. So that's one first step to create that understanding and the working groups and just making sure that people identify that these things exist and create that interest. I think another important element is that I think working groups are looking for the specialists on that species in Latin America. And that might not exist. But really, I think that what working groups need in addition to that are the experts on the solution, right? So you might not don't look for the expert on the species, but what you need to recover the species. That I think will open the number of people that can help out.
Yeah, in the particular case, for example, with this national plan in Colombia, we combine like a species with ecosystem to prioritize regions. Yeah, so and also we prioritize endemic, endangered, and migratory birds too. And also was important the social or culture important for people, because sometimes this species sometimes is endemic or endangered, but it's so important for the community. So sometimes the relation was important to invite this community to work or to monitoring or have action for this species. So in this particular, I think it's important for Colombia and different countries in Latin America. And also for me, this is a good opportunity to be here because I learned more about the whole, which is the work that you have with each species, because sometimes in Colombia, in particular case, we work with groups, for example, shorebirds, warbirds, tanagers, because sometimes don't use a specific species, because sometimes there are more relations with ecosystem, with communities, with work with or other NGO, local NGO is having this territory. So we have more relation. So this is interesting for me, for example, because my work is with more groups and ecosystem and other elements, and not just a specific species, but it's not important too. So on different perspectives and views. So yeah, this is my invitation. Maybe try, I don't know if have groups or other topics, but sometimes integrate other elements that is important in other regions across the Americas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for those great answers. Certainly will help there to our initiative. Yes, and Andrea? It's not a.
At the computer all day, every day, and it's great to hear that. Several of you brought up the language barrier, and I'm want to invite anybody who, even if you're not interested in NIMCA funding, to reach out to tell people that might be interested, but are maybe not feeling comfortable about asking questions about, could they apply, what to do. Please invite them even that we can have conversations in Spanish or Portuguese. And that relates a little bit to Pete's question about barriers also. And I'm wondering if R2R maybe could think about specifically the language aspect and the incredible mental effort that it takes for somebody to participate informally, comfortably.
Yeah, thank you. And I think we don't have any more questions. So I want to thank to our panelists. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, great job. Thank you. Lots of things to think about between Lisa's presentation and the panel for sure. We've heard a lot over the past couple of months about language and the barrier associated with it. If I had to do it all over again, I certainly would take Spanish instead of German. Actually, to be honest, German took me. So I'm going to move right on to Aurelio. If you will come up, I'm going to abbreviate the introduction. Had a lot of great things to say about Aurelio, but in summary, he currently serves as the Senior Vice President of International Alliances with National Audubon. He oversees Audubon America's program in the international partnerships and conservation teams that work throughout Canada, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Prior to joining Audubon, he worked for the Nature Conservancy for 16 years. He managed the Latin American region and co-led the Latin American Council, and it had 35 countries involved, or leaders involved in that. This is going to be an interesting presentation because of his background is not just in biology, but he has a bachelor's degree in economics and a master's degree in environmental economics and natural resources. I think incredibly important as you see his experience in the World Bank, et cetera, and something that we really need to incorporate into our work. With that, Aurelio, thank you so much. Where are you behind me? Thank you so much for coming. Are we set? Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is the clicker.
This is forward.
Yes, that's
and-
forward and that's back.
Okay, great. So they have asked me to shorten this. Again, my name is Aurelio Ramos. I'm an economist. And since very early on in my career, it has always been, focused in conservation, but always thinking about how can we make the business case for biodiversity, and how can we really reveal the value of nature to society so we can really internalize it in decision making. And that was, sort of my focus through my career, and then with the Nature Conservancy for 16 years. And I'm going to start with I'm going to shorten the story. But back when I was with the Nature Conservancy around eight years ago, I was with a very important CEO of an agro-industry, one of the biggest agro-industry companies in Latin America. And we were at his office, and I was sitting with maps and a PowerPoint that the team has prepared with hydrological models showing, if we don't take care of the watershed, you're going to run out of water and you're going to have issues. Productivity of your palm oil is going to go down. And I spent 50 minutes making all of these arguments. At the end, he said, look, Aurelio, I'm convinced I'm going to leave 30% of my land and I'm going to become a leader for watershed conservation. But I have something really cool. Now, are we finished? I have something really cool to show you. Can you stand up and let's go to my computer? So we went around, opened the computer, and there he had two pictures of two jaguars that have been running around in his palm oil. And these were taken a month ago by the Panthera Foundation. So it was really interesting to see, the decision making. It was a business case, but it was also a lot driven by the passion of, an individual species. So I was, on the taxi back to the airport, I just kept thinking. And it was when a few months later, I got a call from Audubon that they wanted to recruit me for the position where I'm currently at. And it's, getting prepared for that. Where do I go? There it goes. It doesn't go.
The mouse is over there, the thing is over here. Mouse is only on that screen.
Yeah. Oh, here.
Okay, so I'll continue. So it was, it was doing my research for Audubon that I really started to understand the power of birds. Just some figures that have been mentioned, 96 million birders just in the US alone. Bird watching that we have been seeing all through the morning is a $90 billion industry based on the Sustainable Tourism Council. It's a great indicator of healthy ecosystems, and is now starting to be used by many of the industries. Most people are connected to birds in one way or another, and they're becoming, they're very unique ambassadors for biodiversity and climate change. And I also learned through that process about, the huge crisis that we are with losing more than 3 billion birds in North America, but also that we have more than 600 threatened species in Latin America. And basically, I wanted the job, and I was able to get it. So very quickly, we jumped with the team, very small team back then, to start to create a business plan for what is now Audubon Americas. We selected 4 strategies, trying to be very focused on what Audubon could be, supporting very quickly: protected areas, regenerative agriculture being one of the biggest threats, coastal resilience, you have seen a lot of it today, and then building a constituency for birds. How can we mobilize all of those bird watchers to be advocate for policy? And very quickly, and this is perhaps my contribution to this panel and to get us going is we identified very quickly a few projects that will be transformational and identify key stakeholders, usually not the ones that National Audubon was used to be working internationally, to partner with them and get some very big projects out there that allow us to start moving the needle. So those are, I'm going to go very quickly with Conserva Aves. This is a partnership between American Bird Conservancy, Audubon, BirdLife, and the partner here, very important, is REDLAC. For those of you who don't know REDLAC is the network of environmental funds. There are 25 of these environmental funds across Latin America. Many of them were developed for debt from nature swaps, and they manage a couple of $1 billion on assets, and they're really powerful. They have both the public and the private hat, and very strong organizations in most cases. And with the REDLAC partners, really what we want through this project is that they mainstream birds in the future. That's what success looks like, is us as bird organization passing all of this capacity and knowledge, so these organizations that are really strong and really big and manage a lot of resources can start mainstreaming birds. So the objective of Conserva Aves back then, a couple of years ago, when we started, was to declare 100 protected areas, local protected areas, 2 million hectares in 9 countries. And it's really about preserving essential habitat. So it's not a focus on species. It's about, I think, a lot of the messages that have been happening in the last 2 days, 3 days is how can we connect those species to habitat for birds and biodiversity by catalyzing local leadership and livelihoods. And this last part is really important for Conserva Aves. This is all run through our partners on the ground, national and local. You see here, a lot of the technical bird expertise is run through our BirdLife partners, and all the contracts and everything that you're going to see on the call of proposals is run by our REDLAC partners, again, which are very strong. And then what you're basically creating is a network of organizations. We basically, all of this is done through RFPs. We were able to get, when we put the proposed, the big idea together, we were able to get $17 million from Bezos Air Fund to launch this, WIS Foundation. So we were very targeted on those interested on habitat conservation. And we have the money, to move forward with around 60 of these 100 protected areas in the tropical Andes. So this is all done through calls of proposals. And basically the first thing that we asked our science team, and Jorge here had the lead, was where are those hotels and restaurants that birds need on their journeys? And let's be very focused on what is the best and the best of those hotels and restaurants and what needs to be happening. So ABC, scientists from ABC, BirdLife, they got together and identify those places that are important for migratory, endemic, and globally threatened species. And that's the map, and those are the maps that when we do the calls of proposals, projects have to be landing on there. The second thing that we did is, okay, what type of long-term conservation categories, what is the process, how do you, we also created a lot of training on done by BirdLife partners on capacity building, how do you build a business plan, so we support this on the long run. And this is a guide, that a playbook that we have for each of the countries where all of that is done. The first call of proposals happened exactly a year ago in Colombia. There are 12 projects right now, 32,000 hectares, 3 community-led, so directly by indigenous groups or local ethnic groups. And we're currently actually finishing the second call of proposal in Colombia. Also, there were call of proposals in Peru and Bolivia done, and they're adding up all of it around 1.3 million hectares of that 2 million hectare goal that we have. So we have some very big ones happening in Bolivia. So we're a little bit scared about the hectare goal, but that, raised it up. So it's really moving forward. Right now, we should be getting very soon, I cannot say a lot about it, another $12 million to move into Mexico and Central America. So those are news that we should be sharing very soon. So these are some of the places in the tipping north. This is in Piojo in the Department of Atlántico in Colombia. This is dry tropical forest, less than 2% left. Whatever is standing needs to be conserved, a lot of restoration. And basically what we do is support these local communities develop their management plans, do the declaration, and then business plans, and get those business plans in places. This is a 4-year project that we fund around $300,000 to $500,000 overall per project. So what we want is good resources that allow this to hopefully be successful. Some of them will fail, but we base this on a previous experience where we have a lot of good results. And this was the first protected areas. We also have a direct investment component, and this was just declared in Ecuador a month ago. It's an extension of the Yacurí National Park in Ecuador in the tropical highlands. So this is the first of the protected areas, and this was led mostly by our BirdLife partners. So that is Conserva Aves, again, an effort of trying to bring other partners and focus very much the project on those donors that are interested on habitat conservation, and again, bringing those 160 migratory bird species that we have prioritized in Audubon that has many of the tipping species. So let me move very quickly into the second project, which is, I mentioned, protected areas, regenerative agriculture, and coastal resilience. This is a platform to try to tackle those other two. This is a partnership, again, between Audubon, BirdLife International, and CAF, which is the Latin American Developing Bank. They invest or they put this last year $16 billion in infrastructure and development projects, but they also do a lot of policy, a lot of conservation. Again, they're a development bank. It is a key partner like the IDB or the World Bank if we want to make sort of some of these transformationals and get the governments to do. And I will say I have been working with banks for many years with the Nature Conservancy, but this is the first time that a developing bank has actually allowed us to get into the kitchen to really cook with them sort of the big loans, sovereignty loans that they're doing and the big projects with the governments. Before, they have always kept us outside sort of with the GF projects and, doing sort of tangential things. So this is really the opportunity and their interest really is on integrating a lot of these investments that they are doing across Latin America and using the power of birds to do that connection. So this is the goal, again, is to catalyze the conservation of 30 landscapes and seascapes as natural climate solutions using migratory birds in 10 years. So these are 3 and 30 very big projects. And I'm going to describe a couple of them so you can get sort of the sense of what we're doing. So the first one is on Chile. This is a coastal area in the city of Concepcion. And this is an area that 50% of that very important coastal wetland that was identified, a lot of the mapping that was done has been lost. And the municipality is interested on, these 4,000 hectares to be put on protection. And they want to create that have 2 benefits for them. One, a recreational benefit and also a flood control. So it's not about the birds, it is about the birds, but it is sort of the way it is sold to the bank, and to the municipality, it is a flood management and a recreational project with some very big investments. So basically our goal, our role as Audubon and BirdLife is to work with the local government, with the national government, the Ministry of Finance, who is going to, provide part of the big loan for this project to make sure that it is prioritized. And we're right now developing sort of the feasibility, the design of how this area is going to be managed and what size of the loan is. Is it going to be a $100 million project? Is it going to be a $200 million project? So we are financing with CAF, BirdLife, and Audubon the design of all of those feasibility studies. And the third one, just to give a different perspective, it is imperative that we transition to low carbon, cleaner energies. So this is a project developed by the shrimp industry with the Ministry of Environment in Ecuador. This is a loan that, when we were was going to be approved, and we were able to put a couple of conditionalities to, change the type of energy in the shrimp industry. Now, as you can imagine, there's going to be a lot of transmission lines that could be problematic for birds. So the opportunity here is to get into this $200 million loan to the shrimp industry to do this transition and do it in a better way. This is a project that is managed directly by our BirdLife partner on the ground, and basically bring the tools to ensure that we avoid, minimize, and compensate adequately in this project. So the project has been approved, so the loan has been approved, and right now they're going through they have identified specific areas where the environmental impact assessment needs to be done, and there is a whole process of including additional components for bird conservation in the project. So we need to have to do 30 of these big projects. CAF is committed to invest between $3 to $5 billion in these projects. That's their commitment, but it's not easy to find this type of projects. We're looking at CAF's pipeline of projects to bring these components, but also other ideas that our partners have on the ground. So what we're preparing right now, because we need a whole team working on this, is a project preparation facility. This is going to be a different organization, part of CAF, that is going to help prepare these studies. There is a credit facility. This is inside CAF. They're creating a bond. There is a GF project right now to create a bond of $150 million. And then the loan components, which is between 3 to 5 billion. And then the enabling conditions facility, which is basically doing the monitoring, the prioritization, doing all the studies that are needed. And that's more sort of Audubon and BirdLife and our partners. And a lot of the monitoring components can be attached to to some of these projects. I'm not going to talk because it was already done by Noemi, but these are very interesting platforms that I will not be. I'm going to finish with a couple of final remarks. The first one is, there is a true commitment from Audubon we have been doing projects, and you see some of that legacy, but right now there is a new strategic plan called Flight Plan, and there is a true, from the board to the staff, commitment to do hemispheric conservation, full life cycle. That means from all the science that Chad leads to, partnering and doing things like the NCAS, the national strategies. So we're really pushing policy, we're really doing capacity building, etc. The second one is we really want to focus, and I think that's one of the messages, is on big transformational projects. Identify those platforms and those projects that are really going to, move the needle, because there is urgency, and we need, to do it smartly, and there are ways to do it. We need very strong and strategic partnerships, as you saw there, partners like Red Lac, or partners like CAF or IDB or the World Bank, or we didn't mention in the NCAS, the private associations are extremely important when we're talking about best practices. those are partners that we need to bring very early on, and they're really excited when you really articulate the power of birds to them. And then finally, it's a lot is about local development. At the end is conservation some places. So you have, this is all about including that local development and a lot of the capacity building. And capacity building is both ways, north, south, north, and north, south. And Audubon is learning a lot from all the work that our partners are doing, and we're sort of adapting and changing every time. So those are, some of the, try to make it as fast as possible, but those are sort of the messages. And again, as Audubon, we're very thrilled on partnering and collaborating and finding those big projects and, and going out and get the resources and the capacity that is needed to make it happen. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. And it cut his talk too short for me. So I'm going to give us a chance for a question or two. Finally, we got an economist here. So we ought to have a question for an economist, right? Yes, Lynn.
I would say, Lynn, that after working for so many years in making the business case, the general business case of these ecosystems is already done. It's already done. No, now you need, so you can use that as a framework. Why these marshes are so important for flood management, the importance of recreation. Well, the municipality knows it. That general business case is already done. It's all documented. Now you need to bring it to the locality. So that's the study that we're doing at the cost of what the design of the recreational, the tubes, the engineering, that's being funded sort of right now to make a cost of that project, 100, 200, $500 million. And that's where we want to make sure we're mainstreaming the bird component. But there is another organization, IICD is an international organization, is doing a lot of the additional benefits that we will get from those marshes, because we want to present that to the government, even though the Ministry of Finance and the governor of Bio has already said, yes, present us the project, it's already on the pipeline. So hopefully everything works out. But there is already an understanding by the local municipalities that those projects are important. Now they need the quantification so they can document that for the loan and then show the results of the investments, basically. But it's not hard. And when you bring the bird component and other additionalities that you bring to it, and that's our role, is to mainstream that. I think that gets them very excited.
And quickly went up. Go ahead, Guy.
Guy Fawkes, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I'll keep it fairly quick, but I wanted to make a comment and see your reaction, Aurelio. We talked really briefly at one moment about this, but there seems to be a tremendous opportunity here for a program like the NMBCA with a extremely large matching requirement to figure out ways to align the priorities to enable R2R species working groups to potentially coordinate the matching element to then enable other actions, either through NMBCA or other programs. I'm curious your thoughts on how we enable that. And then also that's just to lead into probably the next, some of the next topics.
No, absolutely. I think just to an example on Conserva Aves, next month, we're going to have the 100 protected area goal, we are going to be able to accomplish it. And these are 100, new sites. And even though we're including a monitoring component in those resources that we're giving to the local organizations, which is an opportunity because with BirdLife, we're building an Audubon, the monitoring framework for that. There are going to be additional things that are going to be needed to make these places financially sustainable and the governance and everything. And I think there is a great opportunity to make those connections. And yes, we can use, all of that funding to be used as much. And it's quite flexible, to be sincere, some of those resources.
I'm not trying to push you off. Stay right here. I'm going to have the next panel come up so we get ready while we have the last couple of questions. I saw Pete's hand and then I saw Jim, if you can make them quick.
Yeah, Aurelio, I assume some of this funding is justifiable to the banks through offset processes. And I'm wondering, where's the accountability for some of these projects?
Yeah,
how's that work?
so there are sovereign, in most, like the big 3-5 billion, these are sovereignty loans. So the governments need to develop projects and they don't have, they use a credit and basically they allocate it by bank and then they will pay it later through taxes or things like that. So it is really a negotiation between the local and the national government for the use of these resources, and where and these credits and these loans. So it has been a black box. I work with a developing bank, but I was more on the environmental side. But this is more of the people creating the divisions, creating these projects, and there is not a linear process. It's a lot of negotiation and understanding and positioning, and the accountability of these projects. There are audits in the countries. That's how you say, entes reguladores, regulators that look at this, and also CAF has their own, and IDB, they have their own standards to monitor that these resources are well used. Now, for some of the loans that we're going to be involved in, we will be involved sort of making sure that some of the biodiversity and the bird impacts that we're proposing will be happening, and we're putting, ensuring, and again, we're just starting on this journey, that there is a monitoring component to it. So we'll see how all of that goes. So there is a risky component, as you're pointing out, but that's for. Yep. Yep.
Jim, is yours quick? There you go.
Love the long answer. I'll settle for a short one. Capacity building north to south, south to north. How do we do better to have a more balanced, productive relationship?
I think is really creating a structure of governance where you see it as equals and opportunities to learn and improve processes. So just examples in Conserva Aves, just to give one, all the work that is going to happen at the national level through these calls of proposals, we develop it with the Red Lag partner and with the BirdLife partner to make sure that all the components locally are coming, are being kept, and we're very respectful of that. And if we disagree, then we have a discussion. But it is constructed. It's a bottom up and a top down approach on making these things happen. Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much, Aurelio.
Yep.
Appreciate your time. Great job. Thank you. I again apologize for having to cut things short just to keep people on task. We have the last panel and then some brief closing remarks as well. And we want to leave you with a little bit of, inspiration's been a part of all this week. I mean, last night's inspirational talk, et cetera. And we want to leave with really some really good news and some success stories and talking about recovery as it has occurred and looking towards the future in that regard. And we're fortunate enough to have Chad Wilsey, who is the chief scientist for Audubon, who also serves on our leadership team for Road to Recovery. So he's intimately involved in our work. And we're glad to have you and the panelists, and I'll let you take it, Chad.
Great. Thanks, Paul. And we're going to also try to compress our session here. So I'm going to jump right in. And thanks, Paul, for the introduction. So I won't introduce myself, but I want to introduce our panelists briefly. Nathan Cooper, research biologist at Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute. He'll be talking about Kirtland's warbler. Jeronimo Castañeda, Working Lands Program Director at Audubon, California. He'll be talking about tricolored blackbird. And Shiloh Schulte, Senior Shorebird Biologist at Manomet. He'll be speaking about American oystercatcher. So just looking back upon the week, we've heard many perspectives on species working groups and the challenges they face and how R2R is an opportunity to facilitate greater success moving forward. And so what we're going to do is finish this time together on a high note, hearing about 3 different groups that have found success over the life of their efforts. And so some of the R2R themes that are going to come up, that really have come up this week and that we're going to try to emphasize in our remarks, are things like limiting factors, closing the research implementation gap, non-traditional partnerships, getting to scale, sustainability, and funding. These were all things that were key to the success of these different working groups. We're going to try to pull those out in our remarks today. We're committed to keeping our presentations short so that we can have some time at the end for Q&A. And I really invite you to try to connect the dots between the work you're doing and what these groups have succeeded in doing in their efforts, and try to pull on those threads and make connections between the parallels between their work that is, complete or mature and what you're trying to do, which might be at an earlier stage of development. So we've organized ourselves into these 3 different case studies, and we've sequenced them by longevity. So we're going to start with Kirtland's warbler, and Nate, who's going to tell us briefly the story of that species.
Oh, yeah, it is here.
Help us out. How it works.
Went the wrong way. Cool.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, Chad, for those comments and for the invite. I'm going to give a very abbreviated version of my talk, so we'll skip through some slides here. In 1951, Harold Mayfield was very concerned about Kirtland's warblers and started counting them. They found in 1951 and again in 61, just under 500 singing males left in the world. 1966, the species was declared endangered in the very first iteration of the Endangered Species Act with a bunch of other species, some of which have succeeded, others have not. Mayfield and Walkinshaw and others had some educated guesses about the limiting factors. Fire suppression, which led to habitat limitation, seemed to be part of the problem. Lots and lots of old growth jack pine in Michigan. That was, of course, a problem because Kirtland's warblers only breed in very young jack pine habitat. The other big problem was parasitism by cowbirds. In the 1950s and 60s, about 70% of nests were parasitized, so very low reproductive success. The recovery team was formed shortly after listing. This was the oldest photo I could find from 1984. You can see Harold Mayfield at the bottom right there. They came up with 4 recovery actions. First, monitor the breeding population. So they moved that every 10-year census to an every year census. Problem solved. Second was to reduce any factors affecting survival or reproduction. Here, U.S. Fish and Wildlife stepped in, began trapping and killing cowbirds in large numbers in 1972 on the breeding range. In the first year, that reduced parasitism from 70% to 6%, and it quickly went down to 1% shortly after that. The other big task was to create a bunch of habitat. They tried fire, small fires, created habitat, but birds wouldn't move in. That all changed on a fateful day in 1980, the Mack Lake fire. So this was supposed to be a controlled burn, 84 hectares, got out of control. burned the entire colored area you see here instead of just that small yellow circle, about 10,000 hectares. Destroyed some homes, a firefighter lost his life, but 10 years later, created a ton of habitat and birds started to move in, and recovery started. That's where Carol Bassetti comes into the story here. So she did her PhD dissertation on how, sorry, I'll step back. Recognizing that burns might not be the answer because of the lack of public support, they started planting habitat, but they didn't know if it was quality habitat or not. Carol did her dissertation on that and figured out it was fairly equivalent. Managers were able to integrate that into their forestry plans pretty quickly. They started clear cutting massive areas in Michigan, planting 2-year-old seedlings, and then pretty much just sitting back and letting it grow until it was old enough to be occupied at 7, 8, 9 years old. So these two actions were super successful. Carbon control began in 1972, tripled reproductive success, but we saw no increase in population size for 20 years. There wasn't enough habitat to allow the population to recover. That changed after 1980 when the fire happened and created a lot of new habitat and planting began. So we see recovery begin around 1990. By 2000, the recovery goal of 1,000 breeding pairs was met for the very first time. Population continues to grow, 2,300 males in 2015 and today. And in 2019, the species was removed from the endangered species list. So just a few keys to success and then I'm done. First one was the limiting factors were identified pretty quickly. They didn't have a ton of information to go on. They didn't know anything about the wintering grounds at that point, but they had 2 ideas and they went forward on that limited amount of information and it worked. Luckily, those 2 problems were fairly straightforward to address: kill cowbirds, build habitat. But nonetheless, there was a lot of science that went into figuring out exactly how to do that and whether it was working or not. And because the because the recovery team was made up of researchers and foresters and wildlife managers from the start, that allowed research to get pushed into management very quickly. So that was a big key. Human dimensions were also considered early on. So the Mac Lake fire was a big PR blunder for the agencies, and a lot of people were not fans of Kirtland's warblers. They didn't like the idea of more fire, but they also didn't like clear cuts. And so the recovery team hired an outside firm to help change public opinions, and those have been largely successful. We have a lot more support than we did. Lastly, there was a full annual cycle perspective adopted early on. So one of the recovery actions I didn't talk about was basically protect Kirtlands outside of the breeding period. We have learned through my research and others a lot about Kirtland's warblers outside of the breeding period over the last 10, 20 years. It's not led to critical management yet, but with climate change coming, we know a lot more than we would have had we ignored that part of the annual cycle until now. So I think that will be key to its success in the future. This is the recovery team today, over 100 people, very functional group. We work really well together. I get a lot of personal satisfaction out of serving on it. And it's my sincere hope that through our work, we can ensure that Kirtland's warblers and other migratory birds are here for all of us to enjoy for many generations to come.
Okay, let's see. Yes, I figured out the most worn one. Okay, tricolor blackbird. So I lead Audubon and a large group of partners on the conservation and protection of tricolor blackbirds in California. What's really interesting about this particular species is that they're nearly endemic to California, and they're a colonial nester. So as you can imagine, being a colonial nester, any disturbance can have a significant impact to reproductive success and habitat and that sort of thing. The first attempts to assess population occurred in the 30s, and the numbers were estimated well into the millions, and the largest colonies were observed at well over 300,000. And so populations and science continued for the early part of the 1900s. And then the second attempt to assess the population occurred in the 70s. And so at that time, The largest colony was detected at just below 100,000. And so from that 30-year period, we already saw a significant decline in the population. A few champions of the tricolored blackbird really put their heads together, and they petitioned the bird for listing in the early 90s under California's Endangered Species Act. That listing failed, and shortly after that, the tricolored blackbird working group was formed. And some of the early partners you can see here. Audubon, California, some of the dairy industry, NRCS, a lot of the state agencies, federal agencies. And, you know, that effort was, it had limited success. Everybody was working kind of towards the same outcome, but everyone was still pretty silent in their efforts. And so just back to the tricolored blackbird and kind of the impacts on them. So what we're looking at here is the Central Valley of California. In this middle panel, we see pre-1900s distribution of wetland habitat. So tricolored blackbirds are historically wetland obligate species. There used to be vast expanses of tule and cattail marshes in the Central Valley that could host these colonies of hundreds of thousands of birds. And then over time, as folks moved west, we can see that a vast majority of those freshwater wetlands have been lost, leading to the birds, to their populations to be negatively impacted and needing to find another place to build their nests, to call home. And so that brings us to the major conflict. So with the loss of wetlands, and the increase of agriculture, in particular dairies, into the Central Valley, the tricolored blackbirds found a new home. And so you can see here, this particular picture was actually taken last year in Kern County on a dairy that happens to host some of the largest colonies year after year. And so one of the impacts these birds have on the farms is eating the grain that the farmers feed their cows. So here we see one of our biologists from a few years ago walking through a dairy silage field. The birds have keyed in on this substrate because it provides really similar type habitat as emergent wetlands. The structure of the vegetation is really dense. It provides good humidity. It's contiguous, and it can host a large quantity of birds. But as you can imagine, as the birds move into the fields, it's in direct conflict with the operation of the dairy farms. And so as the colonies establish and they're starting to nest, the farmers need to harvest their fields to collect that silage to feed the cows. And so being a colonial nester, you have significant impacts to these colonies that are 10,000, 30,000, 50,000 birds. And so you can see then that the impact to the population can be pretty significant. In 2004, the bird was petitioned for listing again, and that attempt was also unsuccessful. But what came out of that was a stronger coalition to really establish a foothold and develop the working group in a more coordinated effort. And the way we did that was through a regional conservation partnership program with funding from NRCS. And we really brought in these dairy association partners and the farming partners. So Western United Dairies, the Farm Bureau, and Dairy Cares, to really be our allies and our collaborators to co-produce solutions to our success. And so through this partnership, we received funding to coordinate the working group. We identified these 4 strategic goals to help us meet our goals of species recovery. And again, really the main reason this group formed was because we could see on the ground that we were losing colonies from direct harvest events. We didn't really know, we didn't have strong science to support the loss or the population decline necessarily, but we did see that decline. And our friends over at Cornell Lab of Ornithology really helped us out by developing this IPM to demonstrate the decline of tricolored blackbirds. And through our efforts of protecting the largest colonies through our RCPP, by working with dairy producers to protect those colonies, we've seen a increase in the population. And so the RCPP started in 2014. Prior to that, we had conducted several statewide surveys. The first in 2008, where we see a population just estimated just over 350,000. And we can really see a steep decline until we get to 2014, again, when the RCPP was formed. The working group became a bit more coordinated in our efforts. And we have seen a slight increase in the population to date. And again, back to partners, all of this work could not have been done without the great partners in our working group. These are just a few. We're well over 100 members with about 20 or so core members. And you know, the direct protection of the colonies is only part of it. There's a lot of science, a lot of research that goes into the work that we do. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and start a timer because I get carried away very easily. And accountability is important. I'm Shiloh Schulte. I'm the coordinator for the American Oystercatcher Working Group, and I have been since 2009. I want to talk a little bit about this story that we and the Oystercatcher Working Group are very proud of, and how we a little bit about how we got there. I only have a handful of slides, and I'm going to keep it very brief. So oystercatchers were identified as a species of concern back in 2000 through the U.S. Shorebird Conservation Plan. Oystercatchers had a restricted range, sensitive to a lot of coastal issues, development, human pressures, predators, introduced predators, and so forth. And the evidence that there was very low reproductive success. So a working group formed in 2001 and been meeting every year since then, as well as intermediate meetings with steering committee and for specific projects. But we have consistently worked since that time on factors affecting the oystercatcher populations and ways that we can bring the species back from a decline. So from 2001 to 2008, we studied oystercatcher population dynamics. We studied the different vital rates that affected the species and and a lot of the factors that were affecting those rates. But by 2008, the species was, as we had predicted, was still declining. So we had something like 7 years of work where we discovered a lot of really valuable and important information, but didn't actually turn the trajectory of the species around during that time. And what changed was the focus of the group with the partnership with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation in cooperation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Manomet took the role as coordinator at that time, but there's 40 different organizations that are part of this initiative. And the working group, a little bit of arm twisting, moved from a research focus to a research and management focus. And it wasn't that we weren't doing management work before that. From the outset, land managers were part of this group, and we were doing really good work on the ground that showed what impacts different management actions could have. But it was not operating at the scale of the species, and we were not operating to make the kind of changes that were needed to change the trajectory. We were learning, but we weren't changing. And as you can see, following the start of the recovery initiative in 2009, we had an immediate increase in reproductive success. This is, you can see now that the change was the investment from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation with all this matching funding and an increase in the size of the group all at the same time. So all of this investment from this consistent investment was focused on how to modify habitat to improve nesting success, how to change management to improve nest survival, chick survival, and do that consistently over time. Increase capacity, increase the keep the focus on management actions implemented, as well as the ongoing research to understand how those factors were changing. We're very successful. We had got lucky the first year with a really good weather year, but so we had this really high success, and a lot of our projects implemented at the same time, not going to lie. But you can see that the success was maintained at a high enough level. There should be a line here, there isn't, that shows where the line needed for increase, and it's at about 0.35. So this is the line. If you're above that line, your population should increase. So we only had 1 year prior to the recovery initiative where we were kind of up above that line, and all of the years since then have been above it. So we should see an increasing population. And we do. So it was really remarkable how quickly the species was able to turn around when the conditions were correct for reproductive success. That was not the parameter that was most sensitive in the model. If any of you doing modeling of PVAs would know a long-lived species is always sensitive to that adult survival parameter. But we were not able to directly affect adult survival, at least not consistently across space and time, but we could affect reproductive success. So we could model out what the level was that was needed to achieve the goal of a 30% increase over 10 years. We actually did not achieve a 30% increase over 10 years, but we have achieved a 44%, I think, increase over 15 years. So as you can see, the success, the consistent, sustained success has allowed, or management has allowed this increasing population. It's fragile. The parameters that, the issues that we encountered at the beginning, that's why the reason we selected this species, have not gone away. There's not suddenly twice as much Atlantic coast habitat. There are more pressure than ever from humans, but we know that management actions that need to be implemented, they've been accepted at a very large scale by the partners that are doing the work on the ground, and we're evolving that management as conditions change. So we're collaborative, we're coordinated. There was consistent funding. There still is funding through the Atlantic Flyway Shorebird Initiative and through other means, but it's not necessarily where it was. We do have common goals. We've all collectively agreed on those common goals, and we're able to work consistently to integrate science and management on a sustained way. I didn't put capacity in there. It's probably one of the most important things, that with their funding went mostly to capacity building to implement the actions. And then we're flexible, we change over time. So that really wraps up what it is that we wanted to accomplish, that I want to accomplish in talking to you about this. It's not something that we think we can say, walk away, we're done, but it is something we're really proud of.
Great. So hopefully the detail level is there to kind of give you a sense of the species and the working groups and what they worked on. I'm going to open it up for questions, but while you think about your question, I'm going to just start off with one, picking a few of the kind of predetermined ones that we came up with here. Geronimo, I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more in detail about those partnerships and how working with a very different group of people, the dairy farmers, kind of informed what you did, and then maybe even talk about kind of the program that was developed that supported them and helped the birds at the same time. And then after he answers, we'll go out into the audience and get a question from the audience.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. Yeah, so as I mentioned, the working group kind of formed 2 different times. And the first time, a lot of key partners were identified, but we didn't really, they didn't really figure out how to work together in a kind of cohesive way, so to speak. Everyone was doing something a little bit differently. And it really took more drastic declines in the population to kind of light the fire under folks. And anyway, the dairy industry was starting to get a bad rap. And so they came, they were all open to ideas. And so they came to the table, and we sat down together with them and really listened to one another to talk about, the challenges of the birds for the dairy operators. We talked to them about, what we wanted to see as far as recovery and what the needs of the birds were and that sort of thing. And so we looked to different agencies and opportunities to kind of create a program. And we determined that NRCS at the time was the best way for us to provide both technical assistance to producers and some financial assistance to producers while maintaining our goal of protecting the species. Yeah.
Great. All right. Anyone in the audience with a question? I have some more, but I want to give you an opportunity to ask.
Thank you, Chad. I'm really keen on hearing about the capacity part. It sounds like the source of your capacity was different in each case, right? And I'd just like to hear briefly about it, how important it was, because you're talking to an audience that generally doesn't have that. They have other full-time jobs. They don't have a full-time person waking up worrying about oyster catchers, if you will, or warblers or blackbirds.
Sure. I have to say, I love the idea, the commentary from everybody here earlier and throughout the meeting about how the importance of coordinators. So that was very warm my heart. The capacity, a significant portion of the capacity from the recovery portion anyway of our work initially came from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. So there was a commitment to fund oyster catcher management and recovery over a 10-year period. That evolved into the Atlantic Flyway Shorebird Initiative, and those multiple focal species drawing from that same pool. So it's a bit more of a challenge these days. But it was one-to-one matching. So you had to go out and find other sources. And I would say that one of the really critical pieces for sustainability of that capacity has been to incorporate oyster catchers as a management species, annual management species within from at the state level, at the national for national partners, the Fish and Wildlife Service, National Park Service, the larger land managers, as well as municipalities, towns, townships, and everything in between. So some of that we still require annual funding to get the people out in the field to do the work. Otherwise, these declines would immediately reverse. But to some extent, those have been institutionalized over a period of decade and more. So the thinking is that we should continue without some of the same funding, or at least be able to expand without the same annual funding every year.
All right. Yeah, we're going to let one person answer just because I think we should have more questions. So I'm going to follow up while the next person. Oh, great. Yeah.
Thanks all. That was great. Shiloh, can you just remind me, because it's been a while since I've read about the American oyster catcher, what were the main threats and what were the management actions that you were doing? I mean, was it similar to the piping plover where there's disturbance at beaches and so forth? And so that must have involved like working a lot with local people. Can you just give us a summary of that and then remind us what you did?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're right that there's a lot of similarities in that they're both beach nesting species. And we certainly do, the people that are doing a lot of the work, the on the ground work to actually recover the species are working with plovers and, piping plovers, Wilson's plovers, other beach nesters, colonial water birds. So all of those partnerships are connected. It's not that this is happening. In fact, that's one of the things that keeps us going and that we've been able to work oyster catchers in, is because some of these structures were already in place and the knowledge was in place. It was a question of extending the work to include another species that maybe was underserved. And then the management actions that were primarily around managing people. And so I think we'll touch on this, but the idea of how to understanding people's motivations and needs, as well as the motivations and needs of the oyster catcher, because I've only ever been successful at training oyster catchers to avoid me. And people are marginally more capable of behavior change. So the actions were involved management of humans in that environment where they're nesting, as well as targeted and focused efforts on predator management. Those are the big ones. There's a lot of others, but that's the key.
Shiloh, just use this chance to talk about the social science component of the work. Yes, I want to keep going.
I'm paying this off. Okay, so when we started the work with the Oyster Catcher Working Group, we did not explicitly include social science as in 2001 as a core element of the work we were doing. We did incorporate biological science because that was, in fact, a substantial portion of the working group was research, focused on research. We did have managers, land managers at the table, really important key members of our group or still in the group. And so in much the way that we're talking about Kirtland's warblers, the managers and the scientists were in the same room from day one. And we were able to structure research questions around management questions of need. So that's always been the case. And so to some extent that working with the right people to ask the right questions and have that bridging that research to management gap was always sort of a core part of our identity. What we realized as we went was that there's a lot of questions about human motivation and behavior that we had to solve and address that, I got into this so I didn't have to deal with people, right? And that's never been true. We always do that. And so we realized that fairly early on, but fumbling around, trying to figure it out, we had some success. And then really where we started to take off more in a much more professional and cohesive way was when Virginia Tech got involved and Ashley and her group worked with us to start addressing some of those questions. Why don't people ever keep their dog on a leash? Why can't they do that? How do we get them to care? That kind of question. It turns out that's not the right question, right? It's supposed to be, what do they care about, and how do we make those two things come together? And that has been a really important focus, I would say, in the last 5+ years. Maybe that's why the graph started going up higher. But it has been a really important part of our group to making sure that we include, we address those questions of the human needs and behavior, as well as what's happening with baby oyster catchers.
Great. I think we're going to try to end soon. We got 3 questions, so we'll start with up in the top there.
Go ahead. Yeah, I'll count it up. This is for Nate, and it's about the non-breeding. What was the habitat like, prior to recovery and after and during recovery? And the second part is, are you looking at those effects, what climate change, how it's going to affect that?
Sure, great question. There was a lot of debate over the decades about where Kirtland's warblers even wintered within the Bahamas, what type of habitat. As far as we know, the habitat has not changed a whole lot pre and post recovery. There certainly has been no management down there to affect change. They like very short statured, scrubby habitats that are disturbed by hurricanes. One of the best places to find Kirtland's warblers is in like a failed housing development. They like disturbed short habitats. So whatever can set back succession is helpful, but there's no management happening on the non-breeding grounds, and none that we're clear is needed at this point. But like you said, climate change is upon us, and we certainly have concerns about sea level rise. The Bahamas is very low-lying islands. Increased hurricanes, maybe a mixed bag for Kirtland's, hard to say. Long-term drought, we have some evidence now that drought is affecting not only habitat quality on the wintering grounds, but that's carrying over into survival during migration and on the breeding grounds. We're just at the stage of figuring out what those effects are and have not really started thinking about how to, or if we can address them, I would say.
You asked a question already, so I'm going to go here.
Thanks. This is a question for Geronimo. It seems to me like maybe the blackbirds are also considered a pest by farmers, and I'm just wondering how you address that issue with them.
That's a great question. We're still trying to figure that out, in short. Yeah, I mean, some of what we're doing is trying to understand the economic impacts to the dairies and more details about that. And so this past year, we've actually worked with an economist to develop an economic model to better understand that and try to adjust our practices and the resources that we make available to the dairies using that information.
Lots of great questions. I think we're just going to do one more to give Pete some time to wrap things up at the end. So last question.
This is just like
thinking off the top of my head, but thinking about when talking with policymakers, we have these species that are success stories. Is there a way to leverage with policymakers in terms of making changes, like more tangible change with climate change? Like, well, we really don't want to see these species like go down again. So, you know, use those species as a way to get policymakers to make more changes when we can show, like, you know, with Kirtland's increased severity of hurricanes and unpredictability is going to affect these species, drought, et cetera, and use that as a way to, I don't know, make some change.
Yeah, that's really important. In the heart of the oyster catcher ranges is Virginia. The eastern shore of Virginia has more breeding oyster catchers and a substantial portion of the wintering oyster catcher population. And the marshes in the eastern shore of Virginia are disappearing. They nest on beaches, but they also, half the population is nesting in marsh habitat that is flooded at a much higher rate every year, and it's going away. And so that is a huge existential threat to the species. So all of this recovery that we see could go away if they lose all that marsh habitat. So that is a perfect example of something that, you know, we're talking with Fish and Wildlife Foundation about this, and looking to some of the solutions that are happening in Europe with other species with similar challenges. And how do we implement, you know, we're talking about putting up platforms in the marshes to raise so they can have something to nest on, but that's a very temporary solution to a large scale problem. So I think that's an excellent idea. We can make that happen.
And I'll just close the session that, you know, all of these species, and I'm sure there are other examples out there where we have had success, are great storytelling opportunities to demonstrate that, you know, collaboration, consistent funding from federal sources, from other sources, are what are necessary to actually bend the bird curve on these species that are in decline. So absolutely, the storytelling is central to everything that we want to do. So thank you to our panelists, and thanks for the opportunity to share these positive stories. Hopefully it feels like kind of a guiding light for the future of R2R and the efforts of all the working groups. So thanks.
Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate that.
Well, the final few. I'm really here just to schedule the afternoon's pickleball tournament because we're all stranded for the most part. No, I'm just kidding. We're not stranded. We're not stranded, Katie. But I am going to be brief. I am actually going to reduce my comments so folks don't have to worry about getting home or whatever. And I'd like to have more time for conversation than having me up here talking to you. So, and what that conversation will be about is that question up there. Yeah, what inspired you from your time, your few days here, or in a previous R2R webinar that you might have participated in? How is that going to change your approach to conservation? And I also want you to think about what you want to hear from us. What do you want from us? What would be something that you'd like to see R2R do in the future? You know, we are an evolving movement, and we are a movement, and I'll focus on that in a second. We're not an organization. We're just a movement trying to help move the process of saving species as rapidly and as urgently as we possibly can. That's what we're trying to do. And we're not perfect. We're going to change. That's the process. And so we're always interested in sort of understanding what your needs are and how we can help that. But first, I want to start off with a series of thank yous, because we can't do this at all on our own. And the first thank you goes to the Knobloch Family Foundation. The Knobloch Family Foundation pretty much came out of nowhere just a few years ago and recognized the importance of combining science to action to really help save species, save habitat, save critical areas in nature. They understand the importance of that science piece, and that's what makes them unique in so many ways. But they, just in the past 5 or 6, 7 years, I've lost track, Carla, if you're online, they have really been influential in making a difference in so many of the organizations that mean so much to us. And so I cannot be more thankful to the Knobloch Family Foundation and how they have really influenced so many of our projects on the ground that we couldn't have done without them. Also, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation has been instrumental in helping R2R, well, as so many other organizations. So we have to be thankful for organizations like that that are critical in moving these conservation initiatives forward. NCTC has been fantastic. You all now, if you haven't been, just out of curiosity, how many people have never been here before? This is your first trip. So you see this gem of an organization that's pretty much something created by Robert Byrd back in the 90s. And it is benefited so many of our conservation decisions and processes for so many organizations over the years. And it's really every time I come back here, it's been an incredible experience. And what I was going to talk to you about was a little bit of the history of where we come and why we're here now, going back to the 80s, something that I've been lucky enough to participate in. I'm not going to do that now, but if you come to the pickleball tournament, I'll tell you about it there. But NCTC is really a special place. It really is a special place, and it's reasonably priced. I mean, where can you go get a beer for $4.50? I mean, that's pretty damn good. And then, there's several key people. There are plenary speakers that all gave really interesting and diverse plenaries that hopefully you'll be able to sort of think about for a long time. From Lynn on the first day to Peter that first evening. Few too many slides, but overall fantastic and very entertaining. Tammy was just outstanding. Drew's talk last night, I'm never going to forget. I mean, that was just incredible. And then this morning, Lisa, and I'm very close to that whole program, and means so much to me to see Lisa talk. She was just honored by the American Ornithological Society for her work in conservation this past year, and you can see why. And then Aurelio, who's just going to be, changing, hopefully the face of Latin America from an environmental perspective, and that's just so critical that we take on these big projects and we bring in big money to take on these huge challenges. So we're bringing things to scale. It's really essential. It's really essential. But what we're doing here is really something that we think is unique. It's really, I just want to say, it's a movement. We're not an organization that brings together the bird community largely through supporting species working groups. That's really what we're trying to focus on, to develop, support, and implement species recovery before it's too late. Species are clearly slipping through the cracks, right? That's what we're seeing. We're seeing that over the past 30, 40 years, after basically the late 1980s, when we had this big push in bird conservation, thanks to a variety of things. One scientific paper that came out in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science by Chan Robbins and Sam Droege and John Sauer and Russ Greenberg. And then a conference that I was lucky to participate in that was sponsored by Manomet in 1989 that ended up producing a volume known as the Hagen and Johnston volume, The Ecology and Conservation of Neotropical and Arctic Birds. These things were really influential in establishing groups like Partners in Flight, the American Bird Conservancy, Smithsonian Migratory Bird Center, and several other really focused bird conservation initiatives. But a lot of those projects focused on landscape conservation. They weren't focused on those sorts of, there were some of these species projects on species that were really close to the brink, but they didn't focus on a lot of these other species. And what we're seeing is species slipping through the cracks. That's what we're seeing. And so our goal is to supplement, not to replace the important work that's being done by Partners in Flight and a lot of other groups, but to fill in some holes, to fill in those gaps so species don't slip through those areas. And we're doing that through the co-production of science. Science is a good thing, not our enemy. Science is really, really positive. It's really, really important, whether it's basic science or it's conservation science. I'm sorry, it really is. Conservation science cannot be done without fundamental science. We have to do both, and we have to do both the natural sciences as well as the social sciences, and they have to be co-produced. And we understand that. And all these examples, those success stories, we saw that was a critical piece. It's not where I came from, but I've come to that point. I get it. Humans have created this problem. They have to be part of the solution in solving that problem. It is so fundamental. So it's that combination of this conservation, social science, and the natural sciences that have to come together to move the ball forward if we're going to save these species that are slipping through the cracks. We have to be inclusive in our process. It has to involve all international partners along the way. I don't think we're there yet in terms of how we do that. And this is one of the areas that we are working on. We are trying to figure out, and we need to be much more inclusive in that process. We've had some webinars, we've done some work there, but we clearly have to do more work to understand how to do that better. I don't pretend at all that we're there. We have to continue to work on that issue to understand how to better support, cooperate, collaborate, work together as a team on equal footing. We have to do that if we're going to be successful. I would also say that one of the things we have to do is we have to set clear metrics moving forward that we will shoot for, targets. We can't be wishy-washy on that point. We have to be hard and fast and figure out exactly what's tangible and what we have to head at to make success possible. This is what made Drew excited about this. It's that not just that urgency, and there is an urgency here, and we have to move fast. We have to be thoughtful. We have to be careful, but there is an urgency. But it is those tangible things that we're trying to achieve by saving these species, by setting these targets, by using these approaches that gets people like Drew Lanham really excited about what we're doing in his gut, in his heart, not just in his mind. And that's really, really critical as we move forward. The other piece that I want to make sure that we're also doing is that we're approaching all of what we're doing in a really hopeful and optimistic way. There's nothing to be gained in pessimism. There's just no reason to wake up and be pessimistic in the morning. I refuse to do that. As a dean, as a professor in an educational institution where I'm constantly surrounded by young people, like many of you are, I shouldn't even go to work if that's my approach. I believe we can make a difference. I believe we can save these species. I believe nothing will fall through the cracks and that we don't need to be triaging at this point. I don't want to do that. I don't even want to think that that's possible. We know we have success stories that we can actually use to model things moving forward. Is it going to be hard? Is there a species in Hawaii right now, the Akiiki, that's down to one individual female left in the wild? There are stories like that. It's really hard. But I don't think that we should be looking at that as the way forward. I think we can actually solve these problems. I think we can actually take these challenges on. I think we can create stronger ecological belonging around the world so people understand why these things matter. That's our goal. And that's where we have to go. And that's what we're trying to do, is to help people understand where they can make a difference, not, do things that people are already doing and like Partners in Flight. We want to help Partners in Flight. We want to help other organizations, agencies, international groups. But we want to know where can we really be value added? That's really our key. So what I want to talk about now is what's next for R2R. Where are we moving? What are some of our goals? What are the things that we really want to focus on? And again, it's not just us, it's all of us, right? It's not just the core team. We really want to understand from you what also is necessary. So as you hear these ideas, modify them, make some additional suggestions. We are all ears. The first thing is that we recognize is that there's a bunch of retirees or soon to be retirees that are sort of running R2R. And we have to be including the next generation as much as we possibly can in all phases of our work. So if you are interested in this work, if you want to be involved, we've been including various fellows and people as graduate students, both international and in the US and Canada. We would like to have you participate in what we're doing, and we're paying for that. We've put money in the budget to prioritize this. So we would love to continue to pass the baton in all sorts of ways. So we'd like to move out of the way. The best thing I can do in my job is to make space. That's what I try to do. I try to make space so other voices can be heard, so other people can step up and be in that position. That's what we'd like to do. That's ultimately our goal, is to make space. We can provide help for working groups. We are been really intentional in hiring and bringing on a social scientist, Katie Holland, in bringing on biologists, both Tom and Ken, and to bring on somebody, Esmeralda. Where's Esmeralda? There she is, to think about international partnerships. So if you want help in thinking about those things, call us. That's why we're there, to help support you. We don't want to build more infrastructure. We don't want to build a top-down organization. We want to be mean and lean. We want to be very friendly and lean. But provide support so your working group can have that capacity. That's entirely our goal. So reach out to us. We will help you as much as we can in those areas. Webinars. We've held, I think, 4 species working group webinars that have really had great attendance from like 50 to 100 people, where we've learned so much about various species, whether it's evening grosbeaks or the most recent one on Western yellow rail. And so people are telling the stories from the field about what worked, what didn't work, what are their challenges. It's so much fun to kind of watch people, interact on these different issues. It's fun to get a little biology in my life since I don't have much in my current job. But it's fun to really sort of see how people are taking on these various challenges that are so diverse. So engage, listen to those programs. We also want to develop a plan for meaningful engagement with Indigenous populations, which is a tricky thing. And so we're starting to work in this area as well, trying to figure out what the best way forward there is. Also very challenging, but also essential if we hope to be long-term and sustainable. Fundraising is obviously a critical need, and we're always working on that. We want to make sure that we are not just sort of supporting our key needs at the top, but trying to get money out for the pilot projects, trying to think about the big fundraising goals about how we can sort of tackle these problems for all of our shared species. So that'll continue to be something that we're working on. And finally, before we open it up for a discussion, which will be not just with me, but with all of our R2R core team, we are thinking about having and convening a high-level meeting with all the bird conservation organizations in perhaps North America, perhaps the Western Hemisphere. We haven't really sort of figured out the details here, but we need to get the CEOs and the folks that are running these organizations that are frankly all pointing to, the 3 billion birds paper that we worked on in 2019 as a reason why their organization should be funded. We want those organizations to sort of say, yeah, R2R, you're doing exactly what we need to be doing and helping those species that are making up those declines that you're trying to fundraise from. We need to be working together much more closely as we think about saving these species, because that's what it's about. So one of the things we're talking about is actually trying to bring together the CEOs from these groups and having a convening about these issues, where you leave your hat at the door and we're talking about why we're here. That's what we want to do next. So I'm going to stop there, and if you don't have to leave, hang out. If you got to leave, we'll get it. No worries. Thanks to everyone for staying, and thanks to everyone here for participating, because we've learned a lot from you in the entire process and the breakouts, and that's also really important, and we're really grateful for that as well. So why don't we open it up to questions, whether you want to address this question or broadly what you could use from R2R or any other comments. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you very, very much. And also one last thing, thank you to Paul and the organizing committee. I had nothing to do with organizing this conference. It really was Paul, Quinn, Katie, and Esmeralda, and Brant, and Tom and Ken, who really put all the work in. So let's give them a hand. Any questions? Shiloh. Okay. Any thoughts or questions? Yeah, please.
Yeah, I was Tyciply with Audubon and our Southwest offices. So I'm on the Desert Thrashers Working Group. And an emerging threat challenge for those birds is solar energy development. And I was really intrigued with the various presentations that linked back to economics, to industry, and industry partners assisting.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if that's a place for R2R to hit at a higher level, potential industry partners. I would love to have the solar industry, lean into what might be best practices when they put in these solar farms and maybe support research. I know they're doing that for bats. And so that was my thought.
Yeah, well, thank you for that comment. I'm happy to take a swipe. Anyone else want to? I'll take a swipe. Yeah. I don't think we are going to be the organization that's going to sort of, work on best practices or beneficial practices for solar farm development. I think there are other groups out there like ABC and other groups that really focus on that sort of management. I would like to talk to solar farms about funding and support with an industry more generally, about funding and supporting these efforts to conserve birds, much like Aurelio is doing, and thinking about that sort of level of fund. That's where we have to go. We have to work with, my opinion is that we do have to work with industry if we're going to make some of the, and get the big investments that we're going to need, but we just have to do it really carefully as we approach those issues. If we don't work with those groups that have the technological capabilities, that have the understanding to do the transitions, the energy transitions, because we have to do an energy transition. And there's going to be somebody who's going to be on the other side. We just have to figure out how to do it in a way to minimize the negative impacts. And that accountability is really important. We just need to make sure we're really careful about how we do it. But we have to do it. Otherwise, we're just going to be, I believe, we're just going to be spinning our wheels. But we're not trying to go and do the best practices. I think there are other groups doing that. So
I'm much more interested in seeing if the industry would pony up with some funding support.
yeah. Any other questions or comments or thoughts? Who does play pickleball? Yeah, Ashley, good. Yeah, and I should also mention, we are sending out a survey. It'll come out next week. We really do need feedback on that survey so we can continue to sort of improve and do the work that is meaningful for you all. So that would be great. Becky?
Thank you. Yeah, I've been really inspired by this meeting and all of the presentations and stuff that have happened even before this meeting. But I was really impressed how everyone seemed to be on the same page yesterday evening when we were all talking in our breakout sessions, when we were all sharing things. I'm hearing lots of themes that were being expressed at the meeting that I think, anyway, it was really inspiring that everyone seemed to be aligning and getting on this road to recovery even more. So I think you've done an excellent job overall, and I really appreciate what you've done. I did wonder, and I know a lot of your emphasis has been getting to this point for this particular meeting. What have you been thinking about for the next theme? Because I know a lot of times you kind of work on one theme for a bit and then you move to the next one. So has anything been coming up for next themes? Thanks.
Let me take a stab at answering that. Pete already mentioned some of the things we're going to focus on. I think we tried in this workshop to bring in indigenous voices. We were not successful. As hard as we tried for months to make that work, time and space was a problem in doing that. So we think we need to fill that gap. So I don't know if that's a theme or not, but that's an action item for us going forward. As he mentioned, the international component, we need to work more on that as well. You know, we had a great series of presentations this morning, but that's not enough. We need to figure out how to continue an engagement process in that going forward. The work that, frankly, that your breakout group, which I didn't attend much of, a little bit, is pretty important. I think we need to refine some of the management practices we want to share to focus support for the species working groups, either through the work that you and others in that, and Randy, and I'll forget somebody, but working on, I think is really important. So that's some of our staff work. In terms of a future, and the webinars are going to continue, but we have capacity, but it's limited, right? To just, I'm part-time there, you know, and we're just trying to make this work. So we want to hear from you in the surveys about how valuable this was, and maybe hear from you on those next theme for a workshop. I mean, I think our value added, as Pete indicated, is in support of the species working groups, but that may mean convening things like this continuously into the future. But I'm not about to say, well, this is going to be precisely our next theme. I'd like to hear that back from you all, because I feel like we are here to serve you. and not the other way around, if you will. So once we hear clearly in those surveys, we can turn that into action. Okay.
Emily?
I feel kind of similar to that note. There's been a lot of alignment and discussion about how social science is like inextricably linked to this work. But I also think we should have someone who specializes in environmental justice as part of the core team, and somebody who doesn't have a background in birds, but they live and breathe. It's what they do for a living, environmental justice, because I feel like everything I'm learning, that's also, you can't really do conservation work without thinking about it incorporating environmental justice.
That's a great idea. Great idea.
I've got a comment.
Yes.
Sitting here in the
Mike.
corner. One of my takeaways I'll start with, it's really great to see young faces here. One of my takeaways, which I've said in a couple of breakouts already, is that we need to be much more intentional about recruiting the next generation. And that is, we don't have structures built yet in groups like Partners in Flight to really recruit and retain and make it welcoming, reduce barriers to entry. And it's something we've thought about, but we've never really acted on it. And we need to put more energy into that. You guys did a great job of getting lots of Latin American partners to this meeting. I think one way to increase that engagement is maybe to hold the next one in somewhere in Latin America. And before we leave that subject, I just want to put a shout out to all of those who were able to get here from other countries. It's really, truly impressive. And thank you for the time, the effort, the money you spent to get here. I think that's a round of applause to all of you.
I want to respond. Thanks, Mike, for the great suggestion, and particularly in the location, because if we go to Latin America, if we time it right, there'll be no snow. But I agree. Between the language and the travel, we need to do a better job relative to our partners in that regard.
Chris?
Yeah, I echo that. And I just want to thank everybody for putting this together. I think when I came here, just kind of mostly out of curiosity and not knowing really what to expect. And I'm leaving here really inspired. And I think one thing I've been part of several species working groups. And I was talking to some people last night, they've really operated more like research collaboratives. And it's really kind of inspired me to think more about the impact we have with our research and engaging more people to increase that impact. And even I just got off a call with Mike Ward and TJ Benson on our not even working group, our collaboration on Eastern whippoorwills. And if anything, this meeting birthed a new working group because I did what I always do and I volunteered when I probably shouldn't to take the lead on forming that. So I am really looking forward after all the discussions to, I know we don't want to say best management practices. I don't know what we decided, but I'm definitely going to be engaging with you all for kind of trying to figure out my roadmap for how to start this process and build it from the ground up. So we ensure that the research we're doing is having the impact and we're engaging with the right people. So I really want to thank everybody for inspiring us to do that and looking forward to engaging in the future.
Awesome. Thank you. So we are, I think I may have forgotten to say this, but we are working on a document on beneficial best management practices for working groups. For the exact reason you just described. That was something that was really clear that they were all going in different directions for different reasons. And with more focus, we could just be more impactful quicker. So, yeah. Yeah, Jeff.
Would it also be possible for you to make a document on what working groups actually exist? Because I'm learning there are so many of them out there that I was not aware of.
We have that, and but it may not be perfect, and we're going to continue to perfect it or improve it, and we're happy to share that. And we're set it up as a spreadsheet with contact information. We want to align it with joint ventures, align it with states, because we also have another effort to, that Scott and others and Becky and others are engaged in trying to connect working groups with state agencies, in particular the state wildlife action plans, because there may be funding in the future that could support those work. And we've tried to say how important it is to have a connection to the joint ventures as well. So all of that it is a work in progress, and we'll share it. I can't remember, there's like 40 species working groups, 45 or something like that. I can't remember exactly. And we're learning more every day. In fact, this meeting has spawned at least another working group, and hopefully more. The Bachman Sparrow or Bachman Sparrow, depending upon where you, huh?
Bachman was not a great guy.
I understand. Okay. Wow. Way to throw me off. I appreciate that so much. Anyway, that another working group was spawned here, and so we'll continue to grow that list so that we can continue a network and a connection.
We hope to get it on the website.
But you're right. It's really amazing how many different groups have come out of, just out of the bushes organically to sort of try to figure out what to do to make things work for species. Yeah, Henry.
So something that I'm struggling with as kind of an emerging younger member of this community is the pessimism that you talked about and how there's no room for it. And I get it. And, after these meetings and webinars, I always feel like very positive. But then when I'm, in the field, like I was just in Colombia, which I'm very fortunate to get to work down there with cool people. And, they tell me stories of, the higher ups not letting them be on papers when they try to publish their theses. They're, run into so many barriers. They talk about other like North American scientists that come down and like don't even bother to speak the language or get to know them. And so it's been really hard for me personally to like get over that kind of pessimistic side. And so as I'm like, continue to build into this field and I'm like trying to inspire others, does the R2R team have any like, message I can bring with me, not only to like help myself kind of stay out of that pessimistic bubble, but also inspire others? Because I don't know what other people's experiences are, but in teaching just ecology classes and stuff at Georgetown, I'm not really seeing the kind of same inspiration in like the youngest upcoming generation, which is kind of scary. And so I'm just looking for advice to stay above that pessimistic line and keep the momentum moving, because once you guys are you've done your job, and it's up to us to like keep that momentum rolling. And so yeah, just any like inspiring advice you guys have to roll with and help inspire others.
It's funny because you're kind of brainstorming final remarks, and that was kind of what I raised, was wanting to end on a "this is possible" note, because I think that's something I also struggle with. And I think one of the most inspiring things about being part of R2R in this workshop for me has been the people who are thinking of actions built into the research initially, so that there's that conservation application from the outset. And I think a lot of the presentations we saw today were really great examples of that. And I think that's, for me, where these things feel a bit more possible, is where that action and conservation outcomes are incorporated from the beginning, thinking of the people who both benefit and from our work and move our work forward. So I think these interdisciplinary conversations have been, for me, the most hopeful part of being part of Road to Recovery. So that's my contribution, I guess.
Thank you, Quinn. Anyone else? Yeah.
Thanks, Henry, for being vulnerable. So important. And I think two things to share is, and they come from research far outside of conservation. One is having a gratitude practice. And I'm super grateful that to get to be in this space and to get to work with all these amazing people and to have these long-term relationships with folks and to call these folks my friends. And I think that's something that as young members of the group, we need to keep focusing on is becoming mentors for the next generation and becoming those folks' friends. And I was really welcomed by some of these guys who are now retirees when I was in my 20s. And that was hugely helpful for me. And then I think the other thing is to keep in mind is that you can make change. Every individual can make change. And that's been hugely helpful for me as well, is you don't have to sit there and see the bad things happening and think about, what's something that I can do from the position that I do have to start to make that difference, and then start to encourage other people to make that same difference. And actually seeing that sort of progress can also be hugely helpful too. So I understand it's tough, but wanted to suggest those two strategies.
I can follow up on that, Ashley, because I struggle with the same thing, being middle-aged still. It's hard to see all the declines and think about species extinction and think about habitat degradation and think about injustice and still feel a sense of hope and possibility. And I think that's why meetings like this are so valuable, is that you get the sense of we're not in this alone. There's so many people working in so many different ways to create that sort of connection. I think connection and service and noticing and gratitude, but also noticing what's good are some of the things that I try to get out of meetings like this one. Those recovery stories for me personally were really wonderful to see with the long time scale, because I think we get so stuck in 3-year project cycles that we forget that species recovery takes a while and takes some failures too. So I think it's great in these sorts of meetings to highlight the success stories, but also the really big flops. We don't do that very much because we're always looking for funding, but to highlight some of the places where things really didn't work out would be great. And then going back to the call for environmental justice in spaces like this, I think weaving the problems that face people alongside the problems that face birds, and then specifically talking about solutions where there's benefits to both, can bring a greater diversity of people into your space. And I think that there's huge value in that. I'm looking forward to following along with the Road to Recovery as things go forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Great question, Henry. Any other questions or comments, or should we?
Can I add one more comment?
Yeah, please.
Pete, yeah. Also kind of in response to Henry, and I think that this is something that R2R has to offer, and particularly the new vision for these working groups of being more integrated places is, it's one thing to study the science and the problems and to understand the threats, but when you create, and for me, it's working at an organization that's a fully integrated conservation organization, Audubon, we have science, but we're also doing conservation. So those are my colleagues. It's when you're able to connect the science to the action, which again is what R2R is striving for. That's where you see the change. That's where you see the benefit. And we need the science to understand the problems and to understand how to impact change. And then we need the partners to actually affect that change. And so, I think just this opportunity of R2R is an opportunity to broaden that perspective of how your science gets used and how it can be more useful, and that provides hope. So I would, that's been my experience professionally at an NGO, and I think R2R is trying to strive for that with these working groups as well.
You guys all had great answers to that. Thank God I didn't have to answer that one. Any other questions, thoughts? Guy, yeah.
Guy Fawkes,
Fish and Wildlife Service. I think I can't help but respond to the, putting a name to the, the grief that can come with the job that we've chosen to pursue. And just to say that it's been something that I've been talking with my colleague Andrea about a lot, and the Fish and Wildlife Service, there's a whole suite of people that are trying to figure out how to be there for ourselves, while we pursue this career. And so there are a lot of resources that are out there. They're only, slowly becoming sort of revealed as people talk and sort of figure out how to, what we all need to pursue this stuff. And so I guess there's hope in that, and that there are people, that are experiencing the same thing. And so I guess, I offer to at least try to connect to resources as much as I am able. And I do think that there's something there that we need to be really mindful of as we pursue this, so that we don't, burn out.
Yeah, precisely why I brought it up, because I think it's such an important thing. We think about our mindfulness about why we're doing this, and maintaining that optimism and hopeful nature has to be front and center. Amal, yeah.
One of the things that people do very well.
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. I'm Namal De Silva. I'm Vice President for Together for Birds at American Bird Conservancy. I work on the justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and well-being side of conservation. And one thing that is done very well in environmental justice spaces that conservation spaces could benefit from is an explicit time to focus on well-being, to acknowledge grief, and then to think about what keeps us going. And to do that through a mindfulness session or some other sort of sharing of both the grief and the hope, or the shared work. And I never see that in conservation spaces, but whenever I'm in an environmental justice community, there's time taken for that. I think it's a little bit, it's sort of the counterpoint to, in one of the sessions, Drew, I think Lister, talked about the long introduction in Indigenous communities as very important. You center yourself before you talk about your work. And I think this is the counterpoint to that. And those are lessons that could be brought in more to conservation spaces. And it helps us keep going. At ABC, we have a program called Cultivating Balance that's meant to be about acknowledging some of that and avoiding burnout. But yeah, love to talk more about that and share resources.
Thank you for that. I think we might have to do some recruiting soon. Any other questions, thoughts, anything anyone wants to share? Well, should we wrap it up? Any other? Yeah.
I can, and you can say final if you would care to, but, oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only thing I wanted to say really quickly was, like, I've never been to a bird meeting where this has been a conversation, so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
What I was going to say, you thanked, you gave some applause to the staff and folks for putting this on, but my thanks is for you. When I attended each and every, I think I got to almost every one of the breakout sessions, albeit briefly, but I wanted to get a feeling for what was going on in the breakout sessions. And I couldn't have been more heartened by the engagement, the contribution, the participation by everybody in those various breakouts, and that magically seemed to work in terms of sizes, et cetera. I'm sure there were challenges that I'm not aware of, but in addition to the, the plenaries and the panels where we had some good questions and exchange, but I felt like all of you were engaged in building something together, and that that gives me hope. So I'm going to end that way. Take it back.
We'll stop there and just say safe travels, everybody. Thank you.
I didn't mean to end like that.
What's that?
I didn't mean to end like that.
You're good. You're good. We need, someone's gonna have to drive Katie.
She's on her own.
Hey, great job, buddies. I had my emotional moment during Lisa's. About what you, just, yeah, just the beauty of it.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like, whoa, so much is going on and it's so much happening.
Yeah.
Thank
She's done a
you.
lot.
Yeah,
And
but
built-
not just her,
built
just,
a-
it was building up. as
She
we
was
did it.
built partnerships and foundation for now, if people have problems, they can go in and have a ready-made network.
Yeah.
Really, and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Very remarkable. You pulled it off. We knew you could.
Sure. No, it won't be long.
No, but you're like. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for coming.
Safe travels back.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming.